is rolling?
Is this one recording?
Yep, the red light's on. Okay, let's say a word of prayer. Lord Jesus, we're thankful for this day and opportunity to do your service. Lord, you said you should know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And that's what we're interested in accomplishing here today, in Jesus' name. All right, now one more little technical thing that kind of, it's weird, but it goes like this. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Kate, now I'll tell you. What I just did is simply to synchronize the cameras. It's not anything magical.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean, oh my God, the countdown is here. What we're going to do, we're just going to record a bunch of stuff here, and we can do some more tomorrow. If we forget something today, it doesn't matter. We can put it in. If you think of something in 20 minutes that should have been said right up front, it doesn't matter.
Great.
We are simply wanting to reduce this down to tape so that it doesn't get lost.
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah.
And the big job lays ahead. That's the editing. Okay? So I want you to completely relax. There is nothing that can't be done, redone. If we sneeze, if we cough, if, anything.
That's reassuring.
If the ceiling caves in, all we do is clean up the mess and keep going.
Okay.
So everything here is real laid back. You've got a lot of information, and we want to get this down into a storyline, because I think what you've got here is something that is extremely important for people to know about.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about you, and see now where did you start out your life? You were born and raised in the country?
I was raised on a farm. In fact, I live in the same neighborhood in which I grew up. It was my grandfather's farm. Part of it was divided into thirds. But in 1939, my grandfather was an obstetrician in Norfolk. He was also in the Naval Reserves. He was in charge of military intelligence in Norfolk, which is the largest military naval complex in the world. So I was born in the Naval Hospital, which was the NATO headquarters, and brought home to my grandparents' farm. My father was in the South China Seas on a naval vessel. My uncle was in the Navy. So I've come from a long line of military civilian folks. They were not full time military individuals. They had jobs, and they would go into the war. They would be in reserves, and as my grandfather was, he stayed in and retired a Navy captain. But I live in a house that was in part of my grandfather's field. And yeah.
That's very interesting.
But I'm being strangled financially by this Army intelligence group, JAG group, that my husband.
Now, JAG, is that JAG?
JAG, Judge Advocate General. I think American citizens do not realize how many JAGs are in our court system, and they take orders. They are in the chain of command, they're active reserve, and they are in our court system everywhere you look.
Not just federal, state and local?
Everywhere, yeah. And they're going to meetings once a month, and if there is a case like many of the military intelligence wives like myself, and we have information that would come out in a divorce hearing or whatever, they totally control it. It is Judge John Moore in my case in Virginia Beach is an Army Ranger. He is active reserve. He's a VMI Army colonel. He's a graduate of VMI. In Virginia Beach, in the courts, there are at least 6 judges, and I'm including commissioners in that, because in Virginia we have a system where the commissioners do a lot of the decisions, and all of these in Virginia Beach who take care of military wives are military judges.
No, you missed the term VMI. What is that?
Well, VMI is Virginia Military Institute, and it's where General Marshall, the Marshall Plan, went to school. It's a little West Point. There's a lot of tradition there, but it's based on the Greek sort of Spartan military concept. And my father went to Washington and Lee, which is also in Lexington. And I know that there is some sort of, I won't say cult, but there probably is some sort of
club?
Secret society.
Okay.
And so it's very, very tight clique. But what I was trying to say is that the judges are military men, and they're not independent. They take orders.
They take orders.
There's a chain of command, and in my particular case and the other 11 military wives whom I have met so far, there are many, many more, but they've all been handled the same way. Mm-hmm. That's not a normal divorce at all.
Yeah, I've heard of these kind of situations before, but it's never been put so concisely and so reasonably that there would be a connection. Why some people just, no matter what attorney you have, it doesn't matter.
Oh, no.
The divorces and the settlements of assets never go the right way.
No, and there's a FISA court, which I know is involved in my case.
What kind of court?
Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It's a Justice Department secret court that American citizens are not aware of. There have been a couple of articles on it. It's a small group of men, and I think there's a woman on it. I believe there's 7 justices. And in reality, the article that I read, which was given to me by Mike Fuller, and I know he would not mind me using his name, he's a government assassin. He was like my husband, a government assassin who did...
When you say assassin, you're talking like character assassination or kill people?
No, killing people.
Okay.
He's a mercenary, government mercenary.
Okay.
He was in Afghanistan and in Rhodesia, South Africa. And I met him and his wife through Sarah McClendon. He's a real wonderful patriot who is speaking out about what the NATO community and the Army and Marine Corps are doing.
And Sarah McClendon, she's an old warhorse, isn't she?
Sarah saved my life, literally.
Really?
Yeah. I had been having break-ins starting the night of March the 4th, after I was calling everywhere to see if I could find my husband. He would, disappear at times. And I found my husband's diary, which I have here, which they have been not anxious to have get out.
Uh-huh. No, they meaning?
They, General Sheehan, General Krulak, Marine Corps colonels, generals, Al Gray, Cook, and especially General Joy.
Joy.
General Jim Joy.
Uh-huh.
And General Carl Steiner they're evil men. And they are in this diary meeting with my husband almost every day in Beirut. They trained the men in black who killed those people in Waco. It was General Joy and General Steiner. Steiner's army, dirty tricks, special operations. And this is what my husband does for a living. is train mercenaries, young boys from countries like Romania, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, all these countries. They're training them to be murderers. And the taxpayers' dollars are paying for this.
Okay, now they train them just through the normal channels of the military. These kids join the Army or the Marine Corps, and then they select these kids based on some criteria to train them?
They psychologically profile them. The profile, which is similar to my husband's and Lee Harvey Oswald's and McVeigh's and some of the others who were all part of this program. Jeffrey Dahmer was profiled and hidden. You know, what most Americans do not know is that all of these men were
Jeffrey
Army.
Dahmer, he has a military background?
Of course. They're all Army.
Oh, okay.
They were all picked out because they're perverted or twisted.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sexually perverted.
Sexually perverted and therefore, you know.
Yeah.
Well, now I don't think McVeigh was perverted the way Dahmer was, but certainly the group that my husband is overseeing are twisted. So
part of the criteria, they look for people who have got something in their history that gives them a weird bend.
Yeah.
Like they were molested when they were a child,
Yeah.
or they come from dysfunctional families, abuse, whatever.
Strong mother, weak father, no father, poor. Because these guys are looking for security, so they will stay in the military and do anything for that security. This was my husband's scenario. My husband and Oswald are just two peas in a pod.
Huh.
Exactly the same personality, the same type, in the same elite group, I might add, which was doing work with communists and Russians, with Czechoslovakians and with Romanians. I met assassins, I met drug lords, Fahim Kordobawi, whose family were the drug lords in the Bekaa Valley. I mean, he knows the elite of the elite of the elite, and that's why I was warned twice not to talk.
And you were warned...
I was told that I would be killed. I was told that
Your husband warned you about this, or?
Oh, my husband warned me early on in it, but he knew that he loved me in the beginning. I'm sure he really did. But he's a robot, my husband, except when he's drinking. And I think that's why he drank, because the first 3 years of marriage, he was telling me everything. And I come from a very strong Protestant Southern culture, which, you know, when you're talking about shooting people like ducks, the only thing I can relate it to is my brothers going duck hunting, and that's what George would tell me it was like. Killing is just, you know, it's nothing. There's no emotion involved. You just get rid of somebody. And he said he was an existentialist and that these murders were necessary, and, you know, very matter of fact. And I'd sort of go, yep, and we'd be eating dinner, and I was trying to get him to know Christ, you know, to sort of understand a little bit about my background and America's background. But his group they are not Christians. They're what he calls existentialist, and they study German Clausewitz and Nietzsche, Sartre, Camus, Montesquieu. And his thesis at Princeton, which was written for him by a very good friend of his named Todeve, who was a French count, and his thesis was on this. And it was, supposedly it was in French, but my French is better than his. So he could not have written that by himself. I know that. I know it was written for him. But in the intelligence world, and in the communist world, in the world that my husband was in, one had to know French because all of the terrorist trainers and the guys who were funding all the guerrillas and everything were in Paris and New Orleans. They would go back and forth. Still, the 4th Marines is out of New Orleans. And that's been going on a long time, ever since Disraeli, even before, I think. But they had hit squads and, undercover groups in New Orleans. And George would go to New Orleans, all the Marines. I mean, this is where they train, do terrorist training, Lake Pontchartrain and places like that.
Okay, and then this would be during the 1980s?
Yeah, 1980s.
Okay.
From I think New Orleans has been a school for a place where debauchery and murder and cults and
flourished.
Yeah.
Well, there's a New Orleans connection with the JF Kennedy assassination.
Well, you see, Oswald, my husband and Oswald were in the same club. General Jim Joy is in that club. General Louis Buell, who is my husband's benefactor, or whatever you want to call it, is in that club. There is in fact, I've got the name of, there are Russians in that club.
Yeah, feel free to grab any reference material.
Yeah, what I want to tell you about General Al Gray, my husband was the chief of staff for General Al Gray, who was the commandant of the Marine Corps. And I probably shouldn't say this on the tape, and you all can get rid of it, but he's a homosexual.
Gray.
Gray.
Okay.
He's what they call a cherry Marine. Now, I'm not anti. I'm trying to find my. I hope I've got it. Yeah, here it is. The
Now, this
Vietnam
term cherry Marine,
Cherry Marine.
That's a common phrase that's in the military.
See, the thing is, they're guys and they're girls, and I just came from such a real prudish culture.
Yeah.
That's
fine. You came from a normal culture.
And I'm not judging them, but the Vietnam War, I know a lot about that, about the MAXOG program and the Phoenix program, because George was involved with a very important part of that. Not important, really, but he and Al Gray and Louis Buell and Michael O'Boyle and Ollie Whipple were. Do you remember the Manguez and the Pueblo? Was it the
seizure of that little ship?
Yes.
Yeah.
This was. It's run by the mob. Then it was a mob military partnership, joint. It was a joint operation in Korea and in Vietnam. The highest levels of the Marine Corps and the Army in those special operations levels, the individuals are actually in the mob. New Jersey.
You're talking about the mafia type mob?
I'm talking about the Brooklyn, New Jersey mob. My husband, Al Gray, Sheehan, they're all Brooklyn. Cap Weinberger. Heinz Kissinger, there's the Boston mob, which was shipping weapons back and forth to Northern Ireland. And I don't want to get too deeply involved in that, but it goes, Israel, some of the Zionists who came over from Germany, according to my husband, were, he works with those people. They do a lot of money laundering in the banks, cash transactions for the drugs that they're bringing over through Latin America, the Southern Mafia, the Dixie Mafia, which is now my husband's involved with in Miami. The military are all involved once they retire. They're, they go into this drug and secondary weapons sales. And before I forget, I want to find the name of this Russian who worked with Al Gray, who was my husband's boss, and trying to see where I wrote it. I may have to look and find that another.
It's no trouble at all. How are we doing over there, guys? Sound good? How much time is rolled on the clock? On your clock? You can speak. That's
20 minutes.
20? Okay, good.
I can't find it right now. I'll find it.
Right.
The Vietnam was really important because a lot of experiments were done on boys who went over there.
Mm-hmm.
I had, since my husband disappeared and since they have been psychologically trying to destroy me, financially trying to destroy me, because I'm telling the truth. His first wife, I know, was murdered.
Okay.
She was, according to a psychiatrist whose name I probably won't give because he's an honorable man. I was given permission before I went public with Sarah McClendon at the press club anonymously, but they knew who I was on the 3rd of July, 1996, was when I came out with a small group of people. But before that time, they were trying to handle me, to try and get me to be quiet. They tried threatening me and so forth. And I'm trying to remember where I was, the point I was going to make. I can't remember now what I was going to... It was something important. Oh, yeah, General Jim Joy. I called General Jim Joy on the phone. I was trying to find where my husband was because I didn't know whether I'd have any money to, food to eat or what. He just walked away, and I knew that the Marine Corps knew where he was. But I was being handled psychologically. On the 4th of March, my home was broken into. They had elaborate plans to handle me.
The 4th of March, 96?
1996.
96.
And keep in mind, he had disappeared on the 28th of December.
Of 96?
Of 96, 95.
Okay,
So, put yourself in my shoes. I have no idea where he is. He's done this before. And each time, I was totally traumatized. So I get...
What happened during this break-in?
Well, they were looking for the diary, which I have here.
Okay.
I don't have the original copy, but this is the diary.
Okay, can you lift it up?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just...
This is it. It's his Beirut diary.
Kind of hold this.
Yeah. This is it.
Okay.
And it's in his handwriting. The Beirut diary tells how the intelligence community, the Army and Marine Corps assassins, snipers, are how they operate in a city during a crisis. My husband was the liaison between the White House and President Jamal. So my husband is a friend of Scrokoff, McFarland's a Marine. All of these men are personal friends of George's. Colby, I spoke with personally on the phone. 2 weeks later, he was murdered. He went to Princeton. My husband knew him. He knew my husband. He told me, Colby told me that...
This is General Colby?
No, this is William Colby, who was head of the CIA.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Who was murdered in a...
so-called boating accident.
I know exactly how that happened because, you see, the SEAL teams 6, 4, 6, and 8 on the East Coast, and then the odd numbers on the West Coast. And some of the people who are affiliated with the SEALs.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to say it. But
well, it wouldn't be hard for a SEAL to come from underwater and tip the boat over and make sure the man's dead, that sort of thing?
The Israelis train with the SEALs. They do a lot of wet ops, murders, over here because of some sort of arrangement. The young boys, I met 3 young assassins on a bus, going up back and forth to Sarah as I went on the bus because they were sabotaging my car so often. So I sat next to 2 young assassins, one from Romania, one from Haiti. And I let them know that I understand, how it is. And this little boy cried. I won't mention which one it was because it may get back to him. But he told me it was the same scenario. His mother, he lives on $850 a month. Now, these are mercenaries working. The taxpayers are paying mercenaries. The taxpayers are paying young men who are not citizens of the United States to kill innocent people, women and children. They get on a flight from Norfolk and Oceana. They fly to Stuttgart, and I was told this is what they do. Then they go by a special helicopter to countries like Turkey, like the part of Iraq, to Algeria, to parts of Africa, and they do wet ops. They'll just, murder 5, 10, 20 people, and then they blame it on the Arabs, or they blame it on somebody else, but it's actually NATO rogue assassins, because there are men from Australia, South Africa, Britain, that I've been able to determine, and a lot of these other little countries that are sort of wanting to get into NATO, they have little boys that they pick out, and they call them special. They use the word special, meaning elite, irregular, in order to entice these boys because they don't have much ego. So if you call being a criminal, in other words, they are protected. They know that they are above the law. That's what my husband's above the law. Judge John Moore is above the law. Colonel Barry Cantor, my husband's JAG colonel lawyer, is above the law. Grover Wright, Marine Corps. A lot of these guys who were judges had their wives gotten rid of. Judge John Moore had his first wife thrown into a mental institution before he became a judge. He battered her. And I spoke with a man who has a Purple Heart, 2 people who knew Hannah very well. And Hannah Moore was deeply in love with her husband. He got back from Vietnam. He was an Army Ranger. He battered her. He physically and psychologically abused her. And she started screaming, doing because I was battered and bruised. A lot of wives are by these Vietnam vets. But if they're a colonel or if they're a rising star, the wife has got to be crazy because they've got too much invested in these men. And it's a very small cult. I mean, I have heard the things that they do when they're colonels. It's some of the same things that they do in Cap and Gown, which is the Princeton version of Skull and Bones. My husband went to Princeton after he went to the Hun School for 4 years.
Okay, now we should probably clarify a little bit about, you mentioned Skull and Bones, and many of the people wouldn't be familiar with that, and the Cap and Gown. So what are these these clubs that these young inductees are pulled into, secret societies.
Secret societies. And
again, is this to make them feel super special?
Yes.
And also put a control on them
Yes.
so that you never tell these secrets?
Yes. That's it. You have got it.
You know, I've heard a lot of child molesters. I mean, people who are not connected with the military, just plain old child molesters, will molest a child and then tell them, now if you ever tell, you know, they'll take a cat and strangle it and kill it or something. This is what I'm going to do to your mother. This is what I'll do to you.
Yes.
Bad things will happen if you ever tell.
That's right.
And children grow up believing that I must never ever tell. And they don't, generally.
That's right.
Unless someone comes along to help them see the light and come out of it.
Yes. And you see, my husband is frightened to death. I believe that his brother was murdered to keep him in, because he had gone through 4 years of this mind control. And the man who did it, you can see this on the video, his name was Charles Caddock, and another man named Alexander Robinson.
Okay, Charles Caddock.
Caddock.
And the other one?
Alexander Robinson. Alexander Robinson was a Marine, very well-connected Presbyterian family, whose family member was the influential one who brought over the Saudis. The original Saudi head of Saudi Arabia was George told me all this about Mohammed Faisal, Khalid Faisal, and Saud Faisal, and there were something like 32 brothers of the then in the mid-50s, the ordained, whoever was head of Saudi Arabia. It was actually the United States who chose that person, because the United States, through Charles Caddock and that group, murdered the good one, the one whom everybody liked, who was well educated, and who was normal. In, I believe it was 1952, 1953, 1954, in Paris, the universal Saudi, the well-educated Saudi, was poisoned.
And what was his name?
Charles Caddock.
I don't suppose it's all that important, but anyway.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was Fahim, or he died in Paris, and so his brother, his half-brother or whatever, was the father of all these 32 boys, and the 3 oldest now were snuck into the United States. I have a degree in history, Virginia history, undergraduate degree, and master's in Scottish history. And being a Southerner, we always look at, past is prologue. And I jumped into the Saudi Arabian books to try and find out something about the Hun School, which is in Princeton, started by a physicist connected with Einstein in that group. So I was looking for the Hun School because I knew they went there. And they're in all the brochures. They're very proud to say, we have the Saudi royals went here. President Cheeseborough brags about going over there and being wined and dined, and So I only found one reference, but it was a reference that said something like they went to a prep school in the United States. That's all they said. Well, it was the Hun School, and my husband was one of the playmates. Charles Caddock was the bodyguard, quote-unquote, teacher for these guys. So they would go out and play in the woods, and they were doing homosexual things with them. There was a lot of money. They bought a big house.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay, now, I was momentarily distracted.
Okay.
Explain to me a little bit about this, the homosexual event here.
Well, George, for the first 3 years of our marriage, was drinking entirely too much. And he he was trying to let me know about his world, and I'm not judging him. He's a bisexual.
Okay. And he needed help.
He needed help. He needed love. He needed cry. He still does.
Mm-hmm.
He really needs help. And the handlers knew that I was changing him. I was taking him away from this crazy cult that he'd been in all these years. And I mean, we were going to church. He even walked down the aisle one time when Tony Evans preached at Scope. I mean, he was overwhelmed. And
at Scope, no,
at Scope in Norfolk, it's a big auditorium.
Oh, okay.
And so, but he was a little boy when he was. It's mind control. MK Ultra, somebody said. They had a group of men, psychiatrists in New Jersey. I don't know where this place was, but they would go, and even his roommates in Princeton told me about it. George never, intentionally, he never introduced me to any of his friends. So I had to cold call all these people. I got their names and addresses, telephone numbers. I called all these roommates at the Hun School and at Princeton. Mm-hmm. They told me things about George and, holding hands with, with Caddick and other people, about being a cheerleader and going off and so forth.
Now, a cheerleader, this is a kind of a trade name, right?
No, he was a cheerleader for the
at Princeton.
At Princeton.
Okay.
And he traveled with the football team.
Okay.
And here is a guy like that. They put him in the Marine Corps. I don't think that was very nice. Do you know what I'm saying? It was hard for him. But
it was part of the long-term vision.
Absolutely. They wanted him long-term. And it's because of the Saudis. This is what I believe and what his roommate believes. He had a roommate at Princeton who was also at the Hun, who's a dear, dear, wonderful. His mother is an Anglican. His father was a Jewish doctor from Brooklyn, and Jack is a dear, and we talk to each other a lot on the phone. George sort of, dismissed him because George was getting in with another crowd. George got into Cap and Gown, which is the same kind of fraternity. I mean, it's an eating club at Princeton for intelligence officers.
It's Cap and Gown. Would they have anybody involved that wasn't intelligence-oriented?
Football players and so forth. But I have a feeling that Cap and Gown has a lot of intelligence officers and boys who may have been raped. Of course, they'd never talk about it.
Right.
But I know that the initiation is, they get very drunk, and even in the Marine Corps they do that. It's called dining in. They have the shellback ceremony. They do a lot of homosexual enticement. The boys are, when they come in, when they're new recruits, they strip them nude, they violate their personal parts. There's a lot of that is going on.
What about
even now?
Tailhook?
Yeah.
Is there a connection?
Yeah, sure, because the cream of the crop is doing this. They're having group sex parties.
And that was a Navy operation too, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the Navy and the Marine Corps.
Of course, maybe we ought to for those
that's another.
The tailhook, they don't know anything about. Tailhook was refresh our memories.
Well, tailhook. In fact, I when I was single in Norfolk, I know one of the people who was deeply involved with tailhook, who was the captain of the Saratoga, was very much involved with this kind of behavior, and I I know a lot about the, see, I never thought about group sex. This is so awful for me to contemplate that these orgies are going on all over the Mediterranean, that the captains, lieutenants, the men who rise to the top are the ones who are picked to play the games, the pool parties, the nude pool parties. And they have secretaries who come in. I've talked to 3 guys, and of course my husband, who went to these parties. But what they do is, and this is General Al Gray, who was the main prime mover, they would go to a place like Aix-les-Rosés, where Charles Caddock, this teacher who inducted, got my husband into it, he retired in one of these all-male party houses on the Mediterranean. I mean, that's where and my husband kept up with him all through the years.
But these sex parties and orgies, they're all homosexual in nature, or is there some heterosexual?
They start off with the wild secretaries. It's kind of, my husband did those in Indonesia. He did them at a place in Northern Virginia with his first wife. I did not know any of this. I knew absolutely none of this when I married him. He told me he was loyal to his wife. He wanted me to think he was just apple pie, because I'm just a one-man woman.
Right.
When I took that oath to marry him, love, honor, and obey, that's me. But he, when he was married to his first wife, was just an addict. He was a sexual addict, an alcoholic addict. He loves, terror, and his whole little soul was just being sucked away from him desperately. And he needs Christ. He needed me day in and day out. He did not need to be. What he's doing now is running more of these operations.
As you describe this, I can't help but think of Bill Clinton.
Well, of course he was. He was one of those profile boys. But the difference between Bill Clinton, and I'm not saying Bill Clinton's better, but Bill Clinton did not he didn't know anything about the assassinations. Bill Clinton, when I was living with Sarah McClendon, the senior White House correspondent, who saved my life, because she said, Mrs. Griggs, you get up here to Washington right now or you're dead. You're going to be dead. And I still feel as though I probably will be. I'll certainly be financially ruined. They are still doing psychological operations in my home, sabotaging my car, messing with my telephone, my radio. You cannot believe what I've been through in the last 2 years. It is horrible. And it's being done to other women and other wives and other men who don't go along with the program. They are murdering Marines. They're murdering sailors.
Of course, one of the best ways for you to stay alive is to do what you're doing.
Really?
Reduce this, absolutely. Reduce this to video, get this scattered all over the country. They won't touch you, because if you're dead, that validates everything you're saying, see. So,
well, they poison people.
Publicity is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, one of the things that was happening to me after, I must tell you about General Joy. I found his name all through the diary. And what was really strange was that George had mentioned him early on in the marriage, but then after a certain incident at Camp Lejeune, which I think is very interesting, relating to tailhook and something that I did there. I'll tell you about that if I can remember. I called. It took a lot for me to get General Joy's phone number, because the Marine colonels were not going to tell me, because they knew I was investigating. So nobody would tell me about General Joy. I called a person in George's address book who was a general, pretending that I was updating my Christmas card list.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to find Jim Joy's telephone number. He said, oh, he's up there. He's running morale, welfare, recreation for the world, a payoff job with the mob. And he's living outside of Quantico. And here's his phone number. So I call him up. And keep in mind, my husband is infamous. Princeton graduate, chief of staff for Al Gray, who runs all the dirty tricks for the Army. Linda Tripp worked for Carl Steiner, who was a partner of, Jim Joy and Carl Steiner and my husband were the triumvirate in Beirut.
Okay.
And Linda Tripp worked for Carl Steiner down there.
This would be approximately
I think in the 80s. She and her husband were both Delta Force duos. They send them, but then they divorced, so that broke up that. But she's a dirty tricks person, Linda. Anyway, so I call General Joy and I say, General Joy, this is Kay Griggs, and I'm George Griggs' wife, chief of staff under Al Gray, head of half the world, dirty tricks, special operations, wet ops. And he goes, no, I don't believe I know your husband. Exactly his words. And I'm taping it, by the way, because they took my tape. They started coming in and putting sticky stuff and running my, just mind jagging me.
putting sticky stuff
On the tapes, and they would put the tapes on different, they would go to a lot of trouble. They would take things that I said on one tape and put it on another. And, they were having fun with me psychologically. But I taped this conversation with General Joy. And I said, well, that's really strange, General Joy, that you don't know my husband, because I'm sitting here on my bed and I'm looking at my husband's diary that he kept the whole time he was in Beirut. And you're in there almost on every page, you're in there a lot. And you're going over to Cyprus and Rome, and you're, getting money for weapons, and, and then they're going to Tel Aviv, and they're doing this and that. And I said, you mean you don't know my husband, George Griggs? And you're a Marine, and he's a colonel? He went, oh, that George Griggs. Because he knew I had the diary.
I see.
Then he said, oh, Miss Griggs, let me call you back. Let me call you back. So he had to confer with General Sheehan, General Joy, General Gaiman, General Hartzog, and his little cabal, particularly General Gray and General Krulak. So he called me back, and he was just like a little puppy dog. He said, oh, Miss Griggs, I'm going to be in Norfolk on the, the night of the 5th, 6th, and 7th. I'll be at a morale, welfare, recreation meeting at the Marriott Hotel, and I would like to meet with you when I get there. I'll be getting in around 5 o'clock, and I could we could go to dinner, or you could come and have breakfast the next morning. We could eat, blah, blah, blah. Or 11 o'clock, now I have to speak at this luncheon engagement. You're welcome to come to that. Or we can meet at... He went through every hour of the whole time. He could not have been more insistent about meeting me if he'd been my father, my birthday or something. And so
you did meet.
I did, but I was afraid of him because I knew he was an assassin.
Joy.
General Jim Joy, the one who got Noriega out of Panama. He and Sheehan, the one who was behind the whole operation in Panama. This is a powerful guy. He and Carl Steiner. Mutt and Jeff. Waco, they trained all the guys. Waco who went and did what they did to David Koresh. They're the ones behind all the black helicopters and Sheehan. They're the ones, doing all the stuff down there at Kathy McDaniel's down at, in Fort Polk, Fort Hood.
Something new on me. Kathy Daniels?
Kathy McDaniel's had a little talk show. She's a wife of the daughter of the mayor down there at Fort Polk.
Okay.
The little town outside of Fort Polk. And there were a lot of unusual things happening. And because she was talking about it, they took her radio show off the air. And they tried to, it's a long story, but anyway, so General Joy, I got in contact with the NCIS.
That's Fort Polk in Louisiana.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But I met with the NCIS guy and a Marine that I just met cold call, because I was kind of worried about what would happen to me, meeting him. So, may I go to the ladies' room?
Certainly. Matter of fact, Steve suggested
I've
that
had
we break.
to sort of go to the late. That's why I've been sort of antsy.
Steve suggests we break at 5 after, and I think it's a good idea. Let's break and we'll pick up right where we're.
I think you're fine.
We're rolling. Is this a rolling? All 3 cameras rolling right now. They are rolling. Good.
Yep.
Everybody check in. All right. Here we go. Okay, now Steve, come on over here and take a quick glance at the at this monitor. Notice how she's framed here. Does mine correspond about the same?
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I better take a better look. Oh.
So that we cut back and forth, we are.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Actually, yours is like you say. Yours is a little bit tighter.
Okay, just take it wide.
You want this one in a little tighter?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm. She's just right.
I tell you, I have the perfect reference. I can tell now those chairs are giving a perfect reference.
Except that I'm a little bigger than she is, so I may stand a little taller in the chair.
Okay. Oh. Whoa, yeah. So the distance, maybe. Let's just. I'm just going to hold what she says.
Okay, yeah, we don't have to split hairs over it. Okay, we're rolling. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. We have liftoff. We're rolling. This is part number 2 of this interview. All right. Now, we have discussed just a little bit of a recap here. All right, a little bit about your background, about the psychological profile that these guys look for. Let's see, we discussed the diary. We've discussed Kadak and Alexander
Robinson.
Couldn't read my writing. Thank you. And
I have a picture of Caddick.
yes, I noted that. We're going to inject that. We'll inject. In fact, we should have a little session here where we just go through pictures at the tail end of this.
Yeah.
Picture. We discussed tail hook and.
You know what tail hook means, don't you?
Now, what is tail hook? Uh-oh. I got a feeling.
Yeah.
Is it a homosexual reference?
Yeah, sure.
Really?
Sure.
Did you know that, Steve? Isn't it something?
Yeah.
And the average person on the street has no idea.
Yeah.
It's like Watergate. Well, the Watergate Hotel, that makes sense. And tail hook probably is some reference to, what I honestly thought it was? When you refuel a jet or something.
It is. But look, see, the planes look like this. Because, see, I was told this by Jerry Unruh. And Jerry Unruh was a captain when I met him. We were just partying. I had a group of gals, and we were all school friends. And everybody hung around this place called Poppy's in Virginia Beach. It was the place in the mid-'80s when I was at the Virginia Center for World Trade. Well, Jerry was in there. He's an intelligence operative with Scrokoff, Crow, this whole McFarlane, Ed Wilson, who's a really good friend of my husband's, who's a really bad guy. Anyway, they're all some of them are doing this Rush River Lodge thing, which Angleton was doing, where Woodward would go to these big orgy parties. And George went to a few of those. But this, you see, is the plane, and it kind of looks like that.
Okay.
And it refuels.
Uh-huh.
See, that's what the hook is for.
That's called a
refueling.
tail hook.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
But it has a double meaning.
A double entendre, sure.
Because and I went to the preceding show 2 weeks ago, and they had the tailhook booth, and I have some stuff, I don't think I have it with me, but tailhook souvenirs, because they are really trying to promote that, the charitable function of that organization.
Yes, of course. Now, the fact that cover got blown on those tailhook things, that was a major snafu, right?
She had to try very hard to get that out.
That was at Camp Lejeune?
No, I think it was in Las Vegas.
Okay.
But, my thing went on in Camp Lejeune before tailhook, and this is why I got flagged.
Oh.
Because I stopped all the go-go dancers in the officers' clubs, and they got very mad with me.
Ooh.
I can tell you that story. It's true.
Yeah, but why, you didn't realize what you were doing at the time?
No, I was just incensed, that they would allow topless women, young girls, in the officers' club dining room while I was trying to eat late one night. And George says, well, you just have to get used to it. If you think this is anything, you ought to see what goes on in Okinawa. Well, this was 91. 90, it was before tailhook. And the Lord is always with me. Sometimes I don't know where he is, but this particular night, it was about 9 o'clock, and I was starving. And I was really mad because his reaction wasn't, I'm sorry, this is offensive, do you want to go in town to eat or something? He didn't do that. He attacked me. It was a chance to educate me the way they were educated.
I see.
Get used to it, bitch.
Yeah.
Excuse my French.
That's right.
But that's really what he was trying to do. Well, they were all young married officers. Now, I worked at the chamber, and this is taxpayer money. This looks bad. They had, wedding bands on. And one of the guys, two of the guys goes out with one of the girls. So I'm going, after having said, don't you see anything wrong with this picture? And getting no background. I thought, oh, boy, I've got a camera in my pocketbook. I am going to see Marty and Oogie, my old roommate from St. Mary's, little Episcopal Junior College in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I said, whoa, little Lucille Ball comes out. And I just kind of grabbed that little camera with the flash, and I get me 3 little flashes of scattering people. So
just because the camera's going off?
Yes. So that said to me, it proved to him, God, truth is light, light is truth. Hey, this isn't. God proved it. I didn't do it. I didn't argue. I just took pictures. They scattered. Then what happened?
What happened to the pictures?
Well, he tried to grab my camera.
He?
My husband.
Right.
But there were still some men in there, you see, and 2 of the girls. And they were looking at me like, the girls were probably thinking, but the guys, they saw older colonel, chief of staff here, wife. It was bad from the perspective of me being a wife, witnessing this, being ordered to shut up. So I took the wrestler. And I don't know anything about holes, but I knew this was self-preservation time. And I just said, well, I'm going to the ladies' room.
Yeah.
So I went to the ladies' room, and I hid the darn thing. And he wanted to know where it was. We had a major battle. But the end thing that happened was I wrote a nice letter, found out the name of the manager of the club, because I knew protocol. I knew you can't go and just really mess everybody up. And I sent a letter saying, is this normal to have it, to the club manager. But I sent copies of the pictures and the letter to the wife of the general commander of the base and the wife of the commandant.
Oh, man. You wanted to get in trouble.
With the pictures.
Uh-huh.
No, I mean,
Well, you thought you were...
helping the wives.
Yeah. The wives, at this point, no doubt, are privy to all this stuff, right?
Yeah. See, I thought, in the real world, this is what you do. Somebody... But what happened was I went home, and the wives were meeting there, and I told them what I had done, and Carol and Millis said, oh, no, you didn't do that, did you? George won't get promoted. You know, he was trying to make general. But Louis Buell had already died. He wouldn't have made general anyway because of Sue. I already found out about that. But I didn't know that at the time. So, but Charlotte Moore, whose family are better educated, and she's kind of the leader of the pack because she's more rational than the rest of the wives. She said, Kay, thank you very much. We appreciate what you did for us. And then all the rest of them kind of, you know, they're like little puppets too. But then I found out from Brooks West that I was flagged. That General Gray had me marked as a troublemaker.
Gotcha.
So after that, no more stories while he's drinking. You know, it was a very, he was having to balance them and me. You know, he was, I think he was challenged by me because he, you know, he knew that I was a free spirit. He didn't understand Christ. He didn't understand what my boundaries are. But he, because he was a little bit intimidated by my sense of freedom and my, you know, openness, which comes from a complete understanding of where Christ is in my life, you know. And I follow in his footsteps, but I'm a free spirit because I'm created independently, as we all are. And my husband never had that ability to be free from the time he was a teenager.
Because early on he was made captive to these other matters, the homosexual counters and the shame that brings and the control. So he was a bent twig early on.
Yeah, and he had the Saudis were beginning to pile into Russell House at the Hun School in Princeton, which is the school that my husband was in for 4 years on scholarship. He never saw his parents in 8 years. Now think about this. His parents were shipped to California, I believe strategically so that they could control his mind.
Okay.
He was too poor to fly out there. I think he did go one time when he was ROTC on a flight that took him forever and a day to get out there. But he had an uncle later on who bought a house in Princeton when he was in college. So he had a little bit of nurturing. And this uncle became his father.
Okay.
And this uncle's 2 sons and the next door neighbor became his wife. He knew he had to marry because of what he had gone through, and it was, I think, so shameful and so hard on him that he married right at graduation day, practically, from Princeton University, where he had 4 years in ROTC. And he was in the Cap and Gown Club, which, as I mentioned before, is an intelligence sort of football kind of scholarship club. But what's interesting is my uncle, who was in intelligence, Ben Delaney, went through exactly the same hoops. I was thinking, you know, when I met my husband, this is, and it probably was God in many ways, but I thought, isn't it amazing that Uncle Ben, who was the football quarterback star for Princeton, the one year they won the whole national thing, he was, he went to the Hun school. His father and mother were both killed or something happened to them. And I think they were fairly well-to-do, prominent family. He was handsome, wonderful, just a neat man. So he went on scholarship to the Hun. And then, and he went in, it was crew and all these other things. He was in cap and gown. He was, he played on the football team. He wasn't a cheerleader. My husband was a cheerleader. But they were in exactly the same pattern. ROTC scholarship. They left ROTC. They were dependent on the government, on the intelligence community, you know, selling weapons to whatever country. I know the country, but in other words, they were doing work for the joint under the table all these years.
Okay, and directly under whose instructions to sell these weapons? Do you know that?
Yeah.
Okay, who would that be?
Well, it's the Israeli Zionist group in New York.
Mossad? No.
Well, yeah,
but
but everybody thinks Mossad, like they think CIA is just a bogus sort of thing. It's really Army intelligence that does just about everything. They run a lot of the psychological profiling, which is done at Quantico with the FBI. It's all a very small group. Harvard professors connected with, you know, the Tavistock and Dar es Salaam, and there's a sexual perversion group in Vienna and one in Colorado. I think that little girl was part of that experiment, you know, who was
John
murdered.
Benet Ramsey?
Yeah, because I had some...
Well, you know, that raises an interesting point, because here's a high-profile murder that goes nowhere. No investigation, nobody's pinned. It just goes on and on and on.
The parents are involved in that program.
But somebody higher
High
up
level.
is protecting them.
Absolutely.
And the same thing that you're describing about the military.
Sure.
If you're in the clique, you can get away with murder.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Murder, literally murder.
Uh-huh.
And I had a group of visitors. I used to be set up by the State Department, my husband, who had power in the State Department through both Caspar Weinberger and well, his whole crowd. I mean, Caspar Weinberger, George Bush, Colby, Casey. My husband was in that clique. He was in the Princeton Marine Corps clique. Rob, Warner, you know.
You're talking Senator Rob.
Yeah, they're all Marines. Pat Robertson, all 4th Marines. I mean, they're all involved in this. They know, they're running everything.
Now, you mentioned Pat Robertson. You're talking about the 700 Club, Pat Robertson.
Yeah, there's a power thing there. And it's all male, it's all white, and they know the murders are going on. They're surgical, they're strategic, they're political. But what I was going to tell you is I was used because I was the most gullible in high school. And I'm very, very spiritual, and I love people. So, and I was driven to meet all these people from all over the world for some reason. So they would feed me people because they knew I would react. It's kind of like Monica and Bill. I think they put Monica in there to have something on Bill. That's my own feeling. Sarah McClendon feels the same way. Because...
And Linda Tripp was there to guide the situation.
Absolutely. Of course. Linda Tripp was Delta Force. Linda Tripp was trained by Carl Steiner, who's in the diary with my husband. Carl Steiner is called a snake. And he tried to trip up Schwarzkopf. I mean, he was trying to take the whole Iraqi thing over because they had been baiting, you know, using the Israeli rogues in Turkey. They were having little zigzag wars. It's all to sell weapons. It's all about weapon sales. It's all about drugs. It's all about funny money.
Making money.
Of course. And the head Krulak, who is the Commandant of the Marine Corps, his father, Victor Krulak, worked with this Russian, Czechoslovakian double agent who was worked with Al Gray, who was enlisted at that time, rose right up to the top because they were involved with Butcher and this whole crowd that was trying to pick fights. And they were not, they were Army and Navy together, joint. And George kept saying, George calls them the members of the firm. He calls them the members of the firm. I've heard the Brotherhood. They're very close. And it's a small group, and it's very hierarchical. I had Caspar Weinberger's bodyguard farm me when I was at Sarah McClendon's.
Now, farm you.
Yeah, that's a term that they use.
Where they cultivate?
Well, not cultivate, but just want to find out kind of. They're doing profiling on me. Women are hard to profile because we're very easy. We're very easy if you understand women. And I think they need more women in human intelligence because we'd solve a lot of these problems like overpopulation or whatever it is very quickly. Because we're the ones who teach the men how to talk, how to communicate. We think on 20 levels at once. You know, we're very spiritual, we're very practical, all at the same time. And they make mistakes by pegging women as crazy when really they're very anxious to solve problems. They're just very frustrated to see a lot of wacko things going on that don't need to be going on, but the guys don't see it. So with my husband and so forth, I was used. They profiled me. They knew I loved international people because I'd already demonstrated that. And there was a group of sexual psychiatrists from Vienna who came over. I have pictures of them. I was their escort. George was already gone, and I was intrigued that they were still sending me people.
Okay, now you referred to them as sexual psychologists?
Yeah, there's a whole range of psychiatrists who study perversion, sexual perversion. Harvard, Yale, Johns Hopkins, and this Colorado group. Dar es Salaam, where they train the black African terrorists. They train them in interrogation. They train the JAGs in interrogation methods and so forth. And a lot of these guys got their experience in Vietnam. Intentionally, they took these little boys. That's what they're doing in Bosnia right now. They're training future leaders in perversion. They have a school. The British have a school that George was working with in Indonesia for a year. My husband was setting up there was already a program on East Timor, a little place there in the mountains, that had been set up by the Australians during World War II. It was involved, I think, with Burma and, you know, some of the killings that were going on in China and so forth. That T. Parker Host, this man who now controls my husband with Bob Edwards. T. Parker Host, this is how they got together. T. Parker Host, I knew when I was the assistant director of the Virginia Center for World Trade. I was the first woman on the board of the Foreign Commerce Club. I was very involved politically, and I was having a ball. And I met T. Parker Host through someone else. I was the chairman of a board of all these international shippers and brokers. I was just a, sort of a glorified secretary, public relations person. Now, T. Parker Host was the Finnish consul and at one time he'd been the Norwegian consul, the Icelandic consul. I thought he was a really nice guy because he was outgoing, he seemed Virginian. I didn't know that much about him. But it turns out he has one shipping agency when I meet him in '85. He knows my husband's profession instantly because he brags about being with the mob. See, the mob runs the port of Norfolk. I mean, it's terrible to say, the bankers, and then they have I can't say that.
You can't say what?
No. The ports are run by, it's a homosexual hierarchy.
Okay, that's not objection.
Well, okay. And in Norfolk, it's Walter Chrysler, Phil Hornthal, they have the rich ones, and then they get the little ones in by introducing them to the big guys. It's like George met Einstein. Einstein was in that little ring that the Saudis were in. It was a very elite.
No, you're saying Einstein?
Albert Einstein
Okay.
was in that little Princeton ring before he died.
Okay.
George, they partied together. Anyway, so the Norfolk crowd runs the port. It's very organized and so forth. And I knew the person who was running the Maritime Association shipping agency, very nice man who was that way. But I didn't know it, I went out with him. I like him very much. I mean, he's a very nice person. But
And completely homosexual.
Completely. But he liked me, and I thought he was wonderful.
Many homosexuals are very
he's a
engaging people.
very nice guy. Well, his best friend was T. Parker Host. He lived with him for a while. Well, I didn't think anything about Parker because, he'd been married and had a couple of sons, and I thought, well, this is just a guy who's moved away from Newport News for some reason and settled in Norfolk. I thought it was unusual. He didn't have any friends. I didn't know. But it wasn't because of that. It was because Parker had some questionable associations with mob figures, with assassins. He was in the Burma Special Operations Command. He liked living a dangerous life, and he bragged about it to others. My husband and he gravitated to one another. And I thought it was wonderful because my husband didn't seem to have any friends. So I sort of fixed him up with Parker. Well, Parker's the one who did me in, Parker plotted, and it's a long story, but basically, and this sounds petty, but I wouldn't go out with him. And I'm not saying I did anything that was, it's just that he wasn't my type.
Obviously.
Well, I mean, not, but he just was, he's boorish, he's loud, he's kind of rude.
So you're saying even just in a social context?
Yeah. So what happened was, because my husband is so close to Bush and McFarland and Scrowcroft and all these guys, Parker starts getting in with my husband's friends and cultivating them. And he goes from having one shipping agency to dotted all over the place. He goes from being a Democrat in petty little Virginia politics and being the Icelandic Finnish consul to having big shipping deals going through Iceland and Finland and Norway. And my husband's setting up deals in Moss, Norway, which I was the president of the Sister City Association. I was being used while they were setting up, shipment places, transshipment places, I mean, I was witnessing all of this, and it all came back to me, just boom, like that. But Parker, it was so interesting. We had a hearing. I had a hearing with my husband. That very day, George Bush was in town. My husband was in town. My home was broken into while I was in court. Very strategically, I was called by a Marine colonel named Jack, who is very involved with the maritime shipping business, and he knew that I know a lot about that. He called me and invited me as a guest of his to attend the George Bush huge banquet with John Warner while my house was being robbed. My car was sabotaged that day. And guess who introduced George Bush? T. Parker Host. Now, he made it to the big time.
You know, Alexander Haig is another one. You can help yourself to any coffee.
Thank
anything
you.
with it.
Yeah, he's a friend.
Alexander Haig, he rose from nothing to top dog just overnight. That's because he's in the club.
Oh, of course he's in the club. Now, how he's in the club, you see.
Now, all these guys.
Henry Kissinger, Heinz Kissinger. Oh, I have a story.
Oh, we all suspect Henry's a queer.
Oh, yeah, I have a first-hand story from Bob, who was there in Cambodia with Heinz.
Okay, you call him Heinz.
Henry.
Yeah, okay.
Heinz. His real name is Heinz Kissinger.
Okay. We'll straighten out. We got a light that fell down, boys. Did you notice that? We got to be alert to notice all these little things. And that's very hot, by the way.
Haig was an army.
Just say, let's get this straight here, because that is a hot light, and you'll burn your fingers if you don't touch it. By the way, as long as we're kind of in an unofficial break here, did you have to read my note while I was writing it?
Just part of it.
When I was writing it? Or only when I held it up?
When you held it up over here.
Okay.
I made an adjustment.
Well, I was starting to write. I wrote, widen her a bit. And then I looked up. Well, lo and behold, he's done it. So I thought, well, he maybe could read this over my shoulder. That's cool. And then...
Oh, you saw it and interpreted.
I've seen you...
You could read it from here?
Oh, that's cute. This is... Oh, y'all are wonderful. What a team.
And then,
what a team you are.
You could... Thank you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, all you got to do, if you write it, just tip up a little bit, I'll...
Okay. Because the thing that when she's illustrating something and using her hands, well then cease on that and open it up so that we don't lose the lower part of her hands. You know, not far enough down to where, you know, strategically we get out of focus, but just, that's cool. All right. We're back, and this is good. Let's go back to... See, we want to talk about Henry Kissinger, but also I introduced the idea about George Bush. 3, 2, 1. Now, so George Bush, I mean, all these people rise up to the ranks, the same club. Right. No wonder, you know, I saw a little TV clip one time where a reporter was asking George Bush and others about the Order of the Skull and Bones. All these guys were shocked that somebody even mentioned the term, and they just would not discuss it at all.
Right.
And the reporter said, I understand that as part of the oath you don't discuss it. And George just flat out said, it's just not to be discussed. And that was the end of the subject. Now, that's because, I mean, if this really got out, that these guys are all inducted because they've got some kind of homosexual thing on them.
Indoctrination. I mean, or induction. They have to do that.
Yeah.
They do that. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
In a coffin. And it's even now coming into the military totally. The chiefs do that. They put them in the coffin. They do the bowling ball trick.
Okay, you're going to explain this. What happens when you get in the coffin? Why do you get in a coffin?
Oh, they get... When you get your eagles, that's a German thing.
Okay.
You know, it's what the German high command did, and most of them, you know, had the boyfriends and stuff, the Krupps and all of that. It is a German thing that they say goes back to Greece, and it's all the male Marine-looking men that they do it with. See? So now the chiefs have to do that. What they do is George said it's like a zoo. they get everybody really drunk. And they sometimes call it dining in. Shellback is another time that they do it. Not everybody does it, but the ones who do it, if they're young, they get right up to the top. It's a...
Okay, well, what actually do they do? They've got a coffin, they get
anal
inside this...
sex. That. They put them in the coffin and they do things.
Okay, they perform things on each other.
Yeah, while they're all around there going drunk. And
I see. So there's a guy in the coffin.
yeah, and he's the one who
is the recipient of all the acts.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Probably safe to conclude these are oral sex acts on this guy or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, oral and anal, whatever.
Yeah.
But
what's the significance of the coffin?
I don't know.
It's the mystique about the skull and bones.
What's
and death.
interesting is the young SEALs, Delta Force, the ones who go from Army to BUDS, the BUDS training SEALs,
BUDS
is the emerging SEAL group.
Oh, I see. They're budding SEALs.
Budding SEALs.
I see.
And they have to break into houses. Their training exercise is to break into civilians' houses.
For practice.
For practice. They broke into my house. When George and I were first married, I had many underwear. You know, this is terrible to say, but lingerie. I had lots of, I didn't buy much, but it all disappeared. And then when the psyching was beginning, I had white blouses, but they would all have black dots on them. I'd say, George, here's another blouse with a black dot.
It was just a little message?
This is somebody's message, Or I would, after George left, it was batteries in a drawer. You can't tell the police I opened up a drawer where I had 6 batteries and now I've got 50 batteries. They're going to say, well, of course you're crazy, And I started my little sob with a screwdriver. And, I was always looking around for screwdrivers. Well, one day I come home and there are about 12 screwdrivers on the table, neatly placed. Well, you can't call the police and say, I've got 12 screwdrivers, You can't tell people that you've got black dots on all your white blouses. Your shoes are disappearing. And then, this is really, I called the police the first break-in, which was the night of March the 4th, the night before I went to see General Joy at the Marriott.
Yeah.
Well, I had already called the police when I was battered because I was just bruises. I made O.J.'s wife look like Marilyn Monroe. I mean, you talk about. And I was doing this because I thought it would help him, have 45s put to my head. And he's laughing. He'd strangle me and put his finger on my jugular vein. And he'd just say, now don't you dare move. Or I'd be lying in bed and he'd do a jap where he'd just push me off the bed. You can't believe what horror I went through to try and get this man to understand what Christ's love is about. People say, oh, well, you should have left. Well, I took my marriage vows seriously. I knew he was injured psychologically by the war, by whatever he was made to do. So, I'm fine. I just sacrificed a lot. I was in a big wrestling match with a crazy guy, But I still love the little boy within. He's very troubled. But anyway, I called the police after a number of little break-ins. And guess what? The policeman they sent was a little short guy with a short haircut whose name was Shorty Satterwhite.
Okay.
And Shorty Satterwhite was saying, oh, now, Miss Griggs, now you're just making this up. Now, Miss Griggs, this is just, you're just traumatized. Your husband's gone, blah, blah, blah. I found out he was a 20-year Marine.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And not only that, but there's another part of his life. But that's okay. He's a nice guy. But he was a Marine.
And he takes orders.
Of course he does. He's still reserve. So I think, okay, I'll call the FBI. You know, I'll let them know what's going on. I heard about the FISA court and that they, you know, because I'm talking about William Colby, maybe they think I'm a threat because I know all these international people. So I'm just going to call them and tell them what's going on. So I called Torrance, who's the head of the FBI, and he's too busy, you know, too busy. So he sends this guy, Dan McNally, out. And Dan McNally is a very nice guy, and he has this girl interview me, and I type out something about Georgia's history and what I know. Guess who else is a 20-year Marine? Dan McNally.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happens that Dan McNally's best friend, and he's not married either, but that's all right, his best friend, who is from North Carolina and never married, is a best friend of Fred Hentz, who's the one who took me to this place, Mahi Maz, where I had the 2 death threats, who was graduated from college in flat 59. He was intelligence. His father was a German high, part of the Kaiser's elite group.
Mm-hmm.
He was NATO colonel, which I thought was pretty neat, and that's why they knew the profile. Kay likes NATO people because she's going to learn a little bit about another culture, you know. And I'm not saying that because his family were high command, but he was also an existentialist. And
okay, and again, for our viewers that may not know the term existentialist, you mean?
An existentialist, according to my husband, which he is one, Fred Hentz, all of these people are existentialists. They believe in doing whatever it takes. It doesn't matter what the law says.
Mm-hmm.
They will do anything necessary to get what they want politically.
Okay.
And economically and whatever. In other words, killing a leader, killing 5 people, killing 20 people, according to George, is a lot better than war. This is the way they rationalize it. You didn't used to kill women and children in war when the British Army, when they were pure kind of, you didn't go out and kill. I think Dresden, they did do some of that, but that was Walt Whitman Rostow and his crowd. And he's a very dangerous man, because Walt Whitman Rostow is a communist.
Okay, and in what capacity is he?
Oh, he was one of the wise men in Kennedy's administration. I think he was probably responsible for the movement that got Kennedy murdered. I believe it was an Israeli group which did it with some of these rogues.
Okay, now when you mentioned wise men, is this an insider term?
Wise men, yeah. Kennedy's wise men were guys like, the Harvard crowd. And he was trying to bring them in to change things around a lot.
Uh-huh.
Walt Whitman Rostow was the one who got us into the Vietnam War because he wanted to sell the weapons and stuff. He and Victor Krulak, who is the present commandant's father, Krulak was his lackey. Walt Whitman Rostow's lackey. Walt Whitman Rostow went with Taylor, General Taylor, and wrote the report that got us into the Vietnam War. And all the time that the Pentagon was saying, no, 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 he was a cheerleader for the weapons sales. He and Henry Kissinger, Heinz. Mm-hmm. He and Henry. Walt Whitman Rostow, Eugene Debs Rostow, these were communists, named for communists. Eugene Debs Rostow and it's either his son or his other brother, runs the big Boston mob, the port there. His name is Nicholas Rostow with the Weld. You know, with William Weld, they've done all that drug business in Mexico for years. They had that Russian, you know, the one who was murdered by the assassin, Ramon. You know, he was a competitor, Stalin's competitor, and he escaped. Very famous Tolstoy.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Tolstoy became a Christian at the end, and you can't become a Christian. That's a death warrant. So they killed Tolstoy because he was becoming too, I think, now I don't know the whole story. There's probably a lot more to it, and I just, maybe I see completely the wrong picture there. But Tolstoy was murdered by this same Parisian, Spanish, Czechoslovakian, Georgian, Russian group,
Okay.
which are all part of the former Abwehr.
All right.
We've got to stop. Tolstoy is not the correct name. I know who you're talking about, but I can't think of it. Tolstoy is a writer.
A what?
He's a writer. He's a Russian writer. But the guy you're thinking of was murdered in Mexico.
Yeah.
It's not Tolstoy.
Okay. What was his name?
Nice little Jewish boy.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good point to bring this up because if we can correct that name, and don't go that wide. When I'm talking about going wide, I'm not talking about going anywhere near that wide because we get all this junk over here we don't want in the picture.
Are you sure it
That
wasn't
is
Tolstoy? I think
plenty
it was.
He's a writer.
That's just plain for.
I know he's a writer.
Sorry about that.
This
I
guy-
know.
This
It's
guy
okay.
was
You're learning.
the right-hand man of Lenin, and he defected and went to Mexico.
Right.
He went to Mexico and murdered him.
I think it was Tolstoy.
It could be two Tolstoy.
No,
Tolstoys.
Tolstoy is a very famous author.
You don't think of Trotsky?
Oh, yes, you're right. Hey. Oh, got it. Let's correct that. Oh, thank you. Bravo.
We're getting close.
Bravo.
You were doing
Close.
well, and I thought we can't use this because it's the wrong name, and it's going to disrupt the whole story.
Good.
And I'm
Good.
sorry
Okay.
about that.
Good.
All right.
Trotsky.
Well, let's back up. Okay. We have 5 minutes to go. Okay. We can easily do that. That is on this tape.
Tell you what,
We have more time than this, but on this
The
tape.
next tape, and in the next 5 minutes, tell us what Max Sog means, because you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
But I still don't know what it means.
But let's get Trotsky in this piece right now while we're thinking about this. Okay. So let's pick this up with. You were saying about. We were talking about the wise men. We were talking about the Rostos and.
William Weld in Mexico and the involvement of the Mexican government. And it's not Tolstoy, it's Trotsky.
Okay, hold on a second. Won't even necessarily mention that because that will be completely clipped and edited. So just go ahead and tell the whole story, but use the name Trotsky.
All right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
go ahead. Here we go.
This group, which was run out of Paris, is still being run out of Paris, this revolutionary terrorist group which is controlling these Marines and Army Steiner's group. They all operate together. The man who started all of this program during Vietnam used communists who were in the Spanish communist movement. They actually promoted communists in the OSS, which was started by this William, Donovan.
Okay.
So they were promoting and using communists who were actually wanting to get rid of our form of government as a stepping stone to world domination. So this group now in the Army and in the Marine Corps has communists at the very top who are really, existentialist, which means they don't believe in God, they don't believe in Christ, they live for the moment, they believe in sort of one world which has no religions in it.
Right.
They're the ones who put Napoleon in power, they're the ones who put Oliver Cromwell in power, they're the ones probably who actually were behind the Roman Empire and maybe the Egyptian Empire. They put puppet people in power, and they actually run it from behind the scenes. Now, Trotsky, as I understand it, was escaped from Russia. He had become a Christian, I understand, and was working with agents in the United States, Israel, and he was considered a threat. So he had to be silenced, killed. There's an excellent book which I have called The Mind of an Assassin, which is about the background of Trotsky's assassin, a young man named Ramon, who was trained, he was Soviet paid, I think he had experience in Spain. They organized it in Paris, I believe. And, of course, up to the present time, there have been assassins operating out of Rome, Milan in particular, Naples, and Paris. And these are all anarchists, all mob-related. They use mob funding. And, of course, drug money to pay for the weapons, which are brand new weapons. The Bosnia Bazaar, this is the reason we had the war in Bosnia. The war in Bosnia is simply a stage to train assassins, to be a market for brand new weapons, to be a marketplace so that the drug money can be used. And the Army runs the whole show. It's totally run by the Army. The CIA is a bogus thing. You know, it's Training and Doctrine Command. It's NATO. It's SHAPE. Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, started by Eisenhower. It's a totally independent corporation. Its main function is to sell weapons and launder money.
You're talking about CIA?
No,
No,
I'm talking
no.
about SHAPE.
SHAPE. Okay.
CIA is kind of bogus. I mean,
That's just
there.
a trade name for the
Oh,
media
it's to
to
confuse
use.
us. It's just to get us off the track. It's all being done by Army people who are now joint, because the word joint comes from the group that brought over a lot of good people came over, but they came over illegally to kind of escape Nazi Germany and stuff. I don't know that much about it, but I do know that the funding organization, one of the funding organizations was out of New York, and it was called the Joint. And Meyer Lansky, see, our mob, the organized crime, the Jewish Kabbalist group, who don't believe in God really, well, they do. They look at God as a Kabbalah kind of thing, and the opposite of good is bad, and they have to get rid of all the good people and kill them, and then, you know, I mean, they really do this. They're killing people who are good on purpose, and they get brownie points with their little cult. But this funding group in New York, they would pay for passports which were illegal, and in fact, my grandfather was involved with that. That's how I know so much about it, because my grandfather was told to keep silent and not to tell anybody, but of course he told my grandmother, and my grandmother told me, and I've told my children. Everybody knows they brought in probably more than 200,000 Nazi soldiers and SS and, you know, wacko scientists and psychologists, and all of them, most of them, had the German disease, you know, because it was their culture.
The German disease?
Yeah, the German disease is what the Pink Triangle boys were. Colonel Ron Ray writes about this. He's a Marine colonel who's a Christian who's writing about the Cherry Marines, the homosexuality in the group sex orgies and so forth, which brought down the German government, because Naples, which is where all of the Navy is doing their playing, I mean, today in Naples, these orgies are going on. It was where Krupp, the weapons manufacturer, used to take the German high command, and they would go into the Isle, on the Isle of Capri, into the Blue Grotto. And they would have big orchestras, and they'd bring in little boys, little Italian boys, who would be raped. They'd give them trinkets. And, of course, the mothers gradually found out, and just like me, it was one thing when there was just one of me. Now there are a lot more of us wives who are talking and telling truth. And it took those Italian women went to newspapers in Italy. They wouldn't listen. But when they went to the wives of these guys in Germany, it brought it all out. It brought the German government down because they were duplicitous in it, you know. But what they were doing was pedophilia. They were raping, bringing in little boys. They involved the Catholic priests, you know, who were bringing in all. Anyway, so, but what happened was this whole group came over to the United States. And they, it's an old culture, but it is the reason there are a lot of things going on with children these days.
Mm-hmm.
And it explains why it's all being covered up, because if you've got police officers who are playing these games and they're going in the woods like to, what is this place where, I mean, even Eisenhower played these games. Even Mike Kemp out in, it's called the Hermitage.
The Hermitage.
In California, where they all they get drunk and they run around nude in the woods and stuff.
Bohemian Grove kind of
That's
thing.
it, Bohemian Grove.
Okay. Rather than Hermitage, it's the Bohemian Grove.
Bohemian Grove, that's the name of it.
Uh-huh.
My brain's tired.
That's okay.
And the one in, there was a big one in Washington called Rush River Lodge, where they used to all go, and there are lots of places now. But the problem, as I see it, is that I think they're trying to destroy America and the basic Protestant Christian culture, because where you have a militaristic society, which is where the rules are only for those people, and keep in mind that Meyer Lansky and Luciano, Lucky Luciano, and the other man, they chose to go to Italy. Luciano went to Milan. He wasn't banished to Naples and Milan. The two top mob families went there because of the weapons industry. They're selling weapons. I mean, that's what the military is doing. It's totally controlled by the mob. Look at this. Weinberger was General Douglas MacArthur's. He spied on MacArthur in Korea. Who was MacArthur's nemesis? Albatross. It was none other than little old intelligence. I'm going to tell every move you make. Weinberger. Young, but he did it. He brought down MacArthur. Every move MacArthur was going to make, he broadcast it through the chaplain, or his little intelligence network. And he got brownie points with the group because he brought down the big lion. When you get rid of a big lion like that, you get a big job. You've done good work. And they needed to get rid of MacArthur because he didn't want to keep the wars going. He wanted it over, and it's like General Trefay, who took over after the Vietnam War was over, and he was on C-SPAN in August of '96 with former Ambassador Whitehead and a few of the other the State Department Vietnam people. And General Trefay, he had been holding this in for years. He was on C-SPAN. This man let it all out. He said, I took over at the end of the Vietnam War. I was in control, right? Big general charge. So I say, cut off the shipment of weapons. So I tell the Pentagon, cut off the shipment of weapons. He said, I got a phone call from Henry Kissinger saying the weapons are going to continue at the wartime rate.
Sure.
Now, that's when all this stuff with China started. It started before then, because already the communist agents, the New York, Brooklyn, New Jersey mob, were already training Mao. Mao was trained in Paris. So was, you know, the one in Cambodia. What's his name? I can't think of his name. The one who was Pol Pot.
Yeah.
They were homosexually, bless their little hearts, by priests. They were wonderful little boys sent there, you know, turned, which is the word, you know, when they believe their mothers, and then all of a sudden the world's horrible, and then they have these wonderful friends who are going to make them leaders.
Yeah.
They're turned psychologically, and it's a pattern. And so this is why it's so important to know what they are doing to innocent little boys in the Army and the Marine Corps today. Why? Why are they having them go together in groups and strip nude when they're brand new inductees?
Mm-hmm.
Why do they do certain things in public, in front of the group? And
Well, they even do that during the pre-induction visit?
Yes.
I mean,
And they also had the doctor.
that's why I didn't want to go in the Army. I knew there was something.
But they also turn around the other way after doing that. The other way, and they're upside down. And they do this anally.
Uh-huh.
Now, why do they do that in public? Why are the urinals all out in public, you know, without separate stalls?
Yeah.
If they're not promoting this. And then why is it that the ones who are this way rise up faster than the ones who don't?
Because there's someone there noticing
Yeah, sure.
those
Sure.
who are
Vulnerable.
vulnerable. I was going to say rising, but that wouldn't be quite
They're
appropriate.
called rising stars.
Rising stars.
Rising, that's the word the State Department uses for those who are controlled. And when I was volunteering with the State Department as an escort in Virginia, I had this group called, I thought it up myself, VIVA, Virginia International Visitors Association. And I tried so hard to get to be a part of the State Department family. But you know, I'm a Christian, see. I'm a Protestant Christian, and they don't want Christians in there. My goodness. You know, I would have guests, and I would let them know I was a Christian and that I love them, and Virginia's a wonderful place. And
Yeah.
But I couldn't be a part of that.
No.
They sent me people, but I never was a part of it, even though I had lots and lots of dignitaries.
Did you have any contact with Madeleine Albright?
No, I lived with Sarah McClendon for about 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah is a Democrat. See, I was a Republican all these years. I was married for 21 years to a Democratic governor's grandson. It was an arranged marriage, and so I knew a lot of the high-level Democrats. Mm-hmm. Who were really sort of conservative. It's hard, you know, in Virginia, they're very conservative. So when I stayed with Sarah McClendon, I had become a Republican, you know. Huh. And Sarah told me a lot of the things that were going on in the White House from her insider perspective, mm-hmm. which totally challenged my perspective on everything. You know, Ron Brown was murdered, for example.
Sure.
Vince Foster was murdered. Forstall was murdered.
Tell you what, we're gonna break right here.
Okay.
Because we're just about out of tape, I think, on this in here. This would be a good place to pick up, though. Ron Brown, Vince Foster. I think Foster had a Marine Corps background. Is that possible?
I think so. He may have. I bet he did. That would fit right in.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that would fit right in. Because Nussbaum's office was right across the hall.
Okay, we can pop these tapes out, actually.
Okay.
And we're fresh with brand new tapes, the number 2 ones. Let's take a nice little break.
All right. Some of the things he told me, which really startled me and frightened me, was his attitude towards murder, which he said was not murder, because he said emotions are not involved. His cold, calculating view of the destruction of innocent human beings meaning nothing to him, having absolutely no feelings about ordering others to do that.
Now, did he ever carry out some of these murders himself, do you think?
Oh, of course, yeah. In fact, he told me about Malcolm Kerr's murder.
Malcolm Kerr, who's that?
Malcolm Kerr was a British double agent who worked in California. He was one of these these intelligence operatives who worked for both sides.
Okay.
And he had been in California, but he was doing intelligence work in Beirut, undercover. He was the head of the American University of Beirut, AUB, which is in Lebanon.
Okay.
Now, my husband was the liaison between the White House and President Jamal, the brother of the first president who was murdered. My husband was involved with assassinations and operations.
Okay.
He was very upset with Malcolm Kerr because Malcolm Kerr refused, although they were already there, the Marine snipers, the assassins, who were under my husband and General Joy, and Al Gray, of course, were hiding in the dormitory at this university. And, of course, General Gray, General Krulak, General Wilhelm, now Charlie Wilhelm was there. He is now my husband's special boss. And they were undercover there. And they had Malcolm Kerr murdered. Simply because Malcolm Kerr would not allow the Marines to stay in the dormitory. Had I been Malcolm Kerr, I wouldn't have wanted rowdy Marine assassins living in a dormitory with children, essentially, adolescent young children, having set, with their perversion and some of their behaviors. So he was put away for that very reason, George told me. Then there was
Did he
Dale
give you
Dorman.
any details about how he was killed?
No, he told me that he had to be gotten rid of because of that. He then said that, and this is interesting, Mary Clark Yost Halab my husband is handled by her. She is an American double agent who was put on my husband's case because she could handle him. They had an affair, of course, while my husband was first married. I found out about it because she called the house after we were married and wanted to talk to him. And I found in his papers a photograph of her and her bio and all kinds of information on her. And her address in his address book, and I want you all to see that in this movie. I have a photograph of her. They had a long-term affair the whole time he was in Beirut, while she was married to an Arab intelligence double agent who was underneath Malcolm Kerr
Okay.
and who took over when Malcolm Kerr was murdered by them. So what you have here is a favor essentially done to Yost. She was Yost. She's from Louisiana. Baton Rouge, New Orleans.
How did she enter the intelligence picture? Was she recruited from school?
She was at, trying to think. I have her bio.
Okay.
English major, written books on British literature, Phi Beta Kappa. She went to the American University in Beirut. She married an administrator there who became, because of her position, they love the mixed marriages. He was
Mixed marriage in the sense of?
For the double agents. If an agent marries an agent of
from another country.
Yeah, they love that. The intelligence community love that. The State Department loves that. And I was mentioning earlier that about the State Department, when I was living with Sarah McClendon, helping her in 1986, I went everywhere she went because she's the senior national White House correspondent. And I went to the State Department one day because I was curious about why there isn't peace in the Middle East. And I wanted to go to what I thought was the Middle East Department. Well, there was a group of students, and I got a press pass ostensibly to go in and interview them. So I left them and meandered up to the Near East section. And I had quite a few hours. I thought they were going to, say, what are you doing here? Because all the doors were open. They had these little buttons on each door, that they could have closed and you could have had to have known somebody to get in, which I think is terrible. To have the American people not know and not be allowed into the State Department without a special Sarah McClendon. If I hadn't had been living with the senior White House correspondent, I, as a citizen, would not be welcome at the State Department. Now, if they're interested in peace and they're interested in that kind of thing, they're certainly not showing it by the closed door policy. So I went in. There were about 8 or 10 offices. I went in every single one. I was looking to find out who the leaders were. I knew about Aaron David Miller. I knew about David Satterfield, who really wasn't David Satterfield. His family were Zionists who changed their name, to David Satterfield, who was a Virginian senator back in the 30s, who had a wonderful name. It's like Jonathan Pollard. He took the name Pollard, which wasn't his name, because of Governor Pollard. I was married to Governor Pollard's grandson for 21 years. They take the names of honorable people, and then they're not honorable.
And what was his name previous to Centerville?
He lived, now Aaron David Miller, I think that is possibly his name. It might have been Mueller. And I'm not saying that just because they changed their name they're bad.
Right.
But what I am saying, that there is this idea that go ahead and change it and be somebody else, kind of a snake, changing colors for the moment, not being honorable and truthful. Saying my family is Rosinski. Heck, I'd be Rosinski. I'm the 8th Catherine in a row from Scotland. It's ridiculous. But my daughter's Catherine and my granddaughter's Catherine. We're just, it's a family tradition. Weird, but we're happy with that. So David Satterfield, the reason I went there was because in the spring I went to a dinner. It was either a dinner or a luncheon that the World Affairs Council had in Norfolk. And he was speaking. And I'm very interested in peace because as a Christian, I want it. I know it's possible if people are reasonable. And this talk that David Satterfield gave there were probably 20 mentions of Israel to one of the Palestinians. He was extremely biased, arrogant. The arrogance is what bothers me, because you can't have peace, you can't have justice where there's imbalance. And even that comes from the Greek Furies, you know, the female who holds the justice. Women understand balance and justice. And women know, mothers know, if you show favoritism towards one child, the other child's not going to be normal the rest of its life. So a wise mother is fair and tries to be balanced, as most families do that are balanced. Well, after having heard the bias and so forth, and then seen other people who were involved at the State Department in Norway when I was there, when my husband was doing some weapons deals with Newt Eigum and some of the State Department people under the table, when we were supposedly going to Moss for the mayor, and her husband and George were doing some deals. He's sort of a pilot, and you know, there's a lot going on between Norfolk, Virginia Beach, and Norway, and weapons deals and so forth now because of what they set up in the spring of '95. So I went into the State Department Near East section and found there was not one single Palestinian, not one single Muslim, religious, Saudi, you know, Jordanian, not one Christian Protestant, not one Roman Catholic, not one plain old American, whatever, from Corn Pone. Every single person in all of those offices were either Zionist, Israelis, whatever, and they had pictures all over the wall of Israel, Israel, Israel. They had magazines, Israel Today. You know, I was given a copy of one. And there were yarmulkes, you know, and the Israeli writing. In other words, and I asked one of the women after having gone through about, you know, 4 or 5 of these offices, I said, because I was pretending like I really, you know, I was just kind of wanting to know where the Palestinian office was, you know. She said, well, we handle all of that. We handle all of that.
And this is the State Department, the
Near East, the part that handles Israel, Jordan, all of these.
Egypt.
Yeah, the Near East section. Yeah.
It was just totally dominated by Israeli.
Totally. And at that time, the spokesman, I can't remember his name, he was a Zionist, the spokesman for the whole State Department. Of course, we know that, and I'm not saying that Madeleine Albright is doing a bad job, because I feel as though, being a woman, that she is definitely a lot more balanced than Weinberger when he was there, Eagleberger, Schultz, or any of them. Because I feel as if she's trying to do it, but she's not strong enough. There needs to be a fairness in the State Department, because all the weapons sales under the table are going to the State Department. That's why Ron Brown was murdered. Ron Brown tried for the first time to take away the unfair State Department monopoly on illegal weapons and drug deals. Because the drug money is paying for the weapons. The brand new weapons are sold by agents of Israel or this.
No, is this a conclusion you've drawn based on your knowledge of this?
Yeah. Gorbachev, whatever the guy's name is.
Bonifar.
Gorbanifar. Gorbanifar. And it was either him or My husband worked with him. My husband was the one who was chief of staff under Al Gray when North was moved from the Atlantic Command to the National Security Council.
Ollie North.
Ollie North. And when you work in the White House, you work under the Army. The Marines have no overlord as such. They can float, they can be truck drivers and still be 4th Marine, but they're run out of New Orleans, just like Oswald was. See, Oswald was homosexually recruited by Clay Shaw, David Ferry, that whole, the New Orleans, Meyer Lansky's guy, Jack Rubenstein, who was Jack Ruby. See, all of the funding for these operations go through the joint, the mob. And Oswald's mother had moved to New York, and he had gotten under this Zionist psychiatrist. I can't remember his name. But he came down to check on him. He was brilliant, but he wasn't motivated. He wasn't told he was special. His dad died or whatever, And his father was a, I believe, a German soldier. But the point is, Oswald was a loner, brilliant, and a perfect candidate. He and my husband's profile are just, in fact, they almost look alike. And
you mean their profile in terms of their background?
Psychological
not
profile.
their physical profiles.
Yeah, even they look a lot alike. Yeah. And what's interesting is...
He always alleged that he had a double.
Well,
Couldn't
you
have been
see,
your
this
husband.
is interesting. My husband, when I saw him in June, after his having lived with me that fall, he was different, a different facial, everything, than the man I married. The man I married and the man I saw in June were one and the same. Had a fuller face. The mouth, the mouth was fine, but the man that I was with, and I know that I felt it was not the same person. Now, I don't think he could have gained that much weight in just a few months, because he was very thin, and it. Now I could be just. But women sense things. I don't know how to explain it. And I talked to a good friend of Marina Oswald's who knows that her husband was a patsy. And I talked to another woman in El Paso who was in the book The Widows, whose husband was a German, or rather a Czechoslovakian, whose father and 2 brothers had come over here as mercenaries, like all of these young men are still doing today. And the father sent for the little boy and his sister, leaving the mother back in Czechoslovakia. Evidently she had had an affair or something, but she was banished. I think they do this on purpose, though, because I'm finding that the boys identify with their mothers. They don't bond so much with the fathers. And they are their mother's keeper in that country. Now, I've talked to an Indian who had this situation, a little boy from Haiti, and a young boy from Romania. Each and every scenario was the same. The mothers were back there. They were given 5 years to become an American citizen. As they were mercenaries, they had to do things that made one of them cry on the bus. And he told me what was done when they did a hit. There was one man who did things that were just horrible, and he said, I want to get out, but I can't. And this is horrible, to put young men who are strict Roman Catholics, they've got that background, and bring them over here and make assassins of them, or, in other words, to turn them in a 5-year period, and for the taxpayers to pay for this. these young men are training with SEALs. They may have a mother who's an American and a father who's French, so they can go both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, they're not under the laws of the United States, so they can go do the actual murders or whatever. And in Oswald's case, if you remember, he didn't have any problem getting into the Soviet Union.
Right.
And he went into the State Department on a Saturday. The man who saw him was a Zionist. He didn't even meet anybody else. Special, elite. Then he went to this town where there were a lot of, sort of an Zionist intelligence elite group. The Georgian Russians had, because most of the intelligence people for a long time were Zionist in the Soviet Union and in Germany. And I don't know, but I know that they recruited a lot of boys at Eton and places like that, homosexually in England. And then a lot of them went to the Soviet Union after the doctors' plot or something that I think Stalin thought that the Jewish doctors were after him or something. So in 1952, a lot of them had to go away, and they had some sort of a change or whatever. But what's interesting is that a lot of this played into tied into my husband, because he was in the place, the Mecca for the Jewish intelligence, or the Zionist intelligence people in Princeton. All of the movie actors, the movie moguls or whatever, they started out in Princeton. The psychological operations crowd from the Nazi, whatever, they came to Princeton. And, of course, some of them went to Harvard. And they spread out from there. Oppenheimer and it's very interesting. That's where a lot of them were, in Princeton. And he was there, of course, he was born in 1937. He born in Atlantic City, then they moved to Lawrenceville. But his grandparents lived outside of Princeton. So he had a tie with his grandparents. But then his grandparents wound up moving out to California, so he was really abandoned from the time he was 13. And, of course, being under the influence of Charles Caddock, who was the bodyguard for the Saudis, Allah teacher. And he controlled the power in the school. The headmaster Cheeseborough, of course, gave Charles Caddock carte blanche. Why? Because the Saudis bought a big mansion called Russell House. Caddock was there with the Saudis all alone, and my husband was there part of the time. They would go on outings using Saudi money. My husband was taught to fly a plane. He was taught to shoot. They went on they would get nude and run in the woods kind of thing. Even at Princeton, his roommates told me that he would go out with these men. And when his first roommate said, because he really likes George, and George is a really handsome, I think, a little older now, but in those days he was very handsome. And his roommate of the first 2 years, and who'd been at the Hun, said that he had a relationship with a French teacher who was a count or whatever from Paris, who was kind of a teacher's aide, who helped him write his paper, and who knew Camus. In other words, there was a group, this young French teacher, who liked my husband a lot and helped him with his thesis, was also a friend of an older French teacher who was a very good friend of Camus. And Camus was coming over to see him when he was
Camus.
married.
Camus is...
Albert Camus is an existentialist writer who believed in murder and, sabotage. And
The end that justifies any means.
yeah, and he was also an Arabist. They were, you see, Lawrence of Arabia, this group stuff was started by this small group of Kabbalists who were trying to take over the oil. So what they would do would be to find these sheiks and find whichever one would go along with whatever. Well, the Brits were more interested in finding somebody who was fair, not necessarily like that. But then there was a guy named Moose who was in the American State Department who tried to, they wound up, the Americans wound up poisoning this Caddock, got in with the Saudi royal family, the other brother, who wound up getting it. They had a house in Switzerland. The Saudi royals had a big mansions on the Aix-les-Rosés is the place where Charles Caddock died, I understand. And my husband, according to the roommates, one in particular, who said, George never lost track. He always kept up with Charles Caddock. Well, Charles Caddock only died in, 1995, 1994. I only heard of him as a teacher in the first 3 years of marriage. But when was he writing Charles Caddock? He was writing him, Charles Caddock and Robinson, Robinson, I can't think of his name now.
You probably will tomorrow.
Alexander Robinson.
Alexander Robinson.
Was a Marine, very handsome, young, went to the Hun School, and was in Saudi Arabia, in these places, came fresh from there to the Hun School. Went to Columbia University as a history major, which is an intelligence school. Columbia is a school where, for example, Nussbaum went, who was across the hall from Vince Foster. I believe Ezra Pound went there, but in other words, Ezra Pound knew too much, so they just put him in St. Elizabeth's Hospital.
Right.
And it was a wonderful Virginian who got him out.
In the movie JFK, there's
Yeah.
a scene where it shows this homosexual... You've seen the movie JFK?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay, well, I presume
Yeah.
too much. But there was a scene involving Ferry and... who's the other guy in New Orleans?
David Ferry and Clay Shaw.
Clay Shaw.
Clay Shaw was OSS. He was also in intelligence, and he was homosexual.
Yeah. And...
They did dress up.
They were in that movie, in complete drag and a real weird thing. And I'm sure that struck a lot of people as very odd that these people would be homosexual like that. But that, actually, the movie very...
I'll have to see that.
evidently, very frankly, brought that across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting to me is this book, The Widows, has 4 spies, double agents, who work for the United States and Soviet satellites or whatever who were murdered. And they worked for the Navy and the Army, and one of them was a man who was murdered outside of the Army's intelligence headquarters outside of Washington, and in a Holiday Inn, I think it was. And just before he was murdered, he called his wife back in El Paso and said, "The Army is going to kill me. They're going to kill me." Well, he was murdered, and the Army did kill him.
Now, this is a fictional account, or this
No,
really happened?
it actually happened.
Oh, I was thinking the book, The Widows, is not fiction then.
Oh, no, it's all. Golitsyn, the spy Golitsyn was in there. There were a couple of others. Paisley, who was murdered almost like this other man. Paisley was murdered like William Colby. Paisley was also hanging around with homosexuals. He went to the Rush River Lodge. That is the one. So did Bob Woodward. Bob Woodward, you know.
The reporter?
Yeah. Henry Kissinger was a well-known, totally a homosexual, not even both ways.
And so his wife is a marriage of...
Oh, it's just a
Cover,
convenience. Yeah, and
convenience.
he might, maybe he's discovered women in his late age, I don't know. But, no, I heard through a very well-grounded German that Henry's best friend's father told Henry to stay away from him, and that's why Henry left. The family were embarrassed, and Henry went to Britain where they did this, and then changed his name from Heinz to Henry. And I interviewed a man named Bob, who's an Army enlisted person who told me about Henry in Cambodia. So he, up through Cambodia, he was actually raping young men. And of course, that experience destroyed the lives of these 5 young men, according to the source. I mean, he said he was crying, and this man was a perfectly wonderful, functioning, young married man who worked for a newspaper on the Eastern Shore and had 3 young children, went to Vietnam as an enlisted man, was put in Cambodia, which he said it was a lie living there, and then ran into Henry Kissinger, or Henry Kissinger ran into him and did certain things to him, invited him into his tent with some other men. It was horrible, but it was, he said it's wartime and so forth. But he said, I could have taken it mentally if it had been a bunkmate or something. But he said, when it's someone like Henry Kissinger who does it to you, you're ruined. He said, I could never, he said he came back home. Oh, and this is interesting, and I really believe that Bob's right. He said, Kissinger said to him, if you ever tell anybody, if you ever mention a soul, it's the end of you. Don't you ever tell anybody. Well, when Bob got back, he went to a special hospital, and they were going to keep him locked up forever.
Bob.
A lot of the other boys just, my feeling is that he was flagged the way I was flagged when General Gray and, Wilhelm had me flagged because I broke up the go-go dancing in the officers' club. I was labeled a troublemaker because I thought it was wrong for married men to be going out with topless go-go dancers in the officers' club dining room, and I took pictures of it, and my husband, got really mad and so forth.
And these pictures today are still with you, or they're missing?
Oh, no. My husband, what happened, I had the pictures. I risked my life because he tried to grab the camera from me. I hid it in the women's bathroom, and he tried to get it from me. We had a terrible fight that night. He wanted the pictures, and I prevailed. I developed the pictures, wrote a very nice Southern letter, wrote the letter to the club manager saying I didn't think it was proper. Had 3 sets, actually 4 sets of the 3 photographs I took made, and I sent a copy of the letter and the photographs to the base commander's wife and to the commandant's wife, and it stopped. But I was flagged, so I know. But this was before Tailhook, and yet instead of being congratulated for helping family values, for standing up for the wives, for showing the Marine Corps the proper place to have nudity and debauchery is not in the dining room of Camp Lejeune. And my husband said, well, this is nothing compared to Okinawa. You just have to get used to it, he told me. Now, I was a colonel's wife. These were young majors, and they were seeing me being talked down to. What do you think it did to them? It demoralized them. The Marine Corps was demoralized. The wives were demoralized, and I did what was right, what Jesus Christ would have done. How can they call themselves Christians and condone, how can Al Gray and Wilhelm and Cook and my husband condone this kind of behavior and flag me as a weirdo?
Mm-hmm.
So there's something, and that's where I'm standing. I'm standing on what I know Jesus Christ would have done. And if they want to, continue to hound me because I'm telling truth, well, that's just the way it is, because I'm not going to lie and develop a different kind of personality just to please them.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that happened.
Well, it's certainly honorable. Now, so then the book, The Widows,
Yeah.
continues with...
Yes. Yes, and I contacted this woman. There was a detective who had to be hired. She knew he'd been murdered. The Army covered everything up. She had an independent investigator. And the interesting thing which happened was that she worked in a toy shop. This isn't in the book. She told me this over the phone.
This is Mrs.
Yeah, it's like Klein.
Oh, anyway. So,
Yeah. Anyway, he's a... I'll think of it in a minute,
Okay.
hopefully. But she worked in a toy shop, and they were scoping her out. And this was just after the... No, it was before he was murdered. It was before he was murdered, because she said she told her husband about this. George Bush and his wife came into her shop and were looking at her.
Right.
Now, I don't know what that means, but they don't live in El Paso. Why? And he was doing all of the Russian, Mexican, Trotsky kind of work for
George Bush.
George Bush. No, this guy.
This guy was.
Yeah,
And this is while
Weapons
George
sales.
was CIA director.
right. I believe he was CIA director then. But the interesting thing to me was that why would he scope the wife? Why would he bring Barbara in? Did Barbara know? Was he just using Barbara as a, But she was being observed.
Mm.
And it was shortly before he was murdered. And I know that Parker Host, my husband's friend, has dealings with George Bush. So, I don't know. I know there's a lot to do with oil and Aramco and, Texas and all of that. I know it's very complex, but where I draw the line is murder and assassination and corruption and lies and deception and cruelty to innocent women and children and families just because they're not elite.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, now, Mrs. Bush is in the Colonial Dames. So is my mother.
Colonial Dames? What
Colonial Dames. It's a... Colonial Dames is a very elite group of women, they think they are, who are descendants of George Washington's aides.
Oh.
And they own George Washington's ancestral home, Salgrave Manor in Great Britain. They run, they have Wilton in Richmond, which is an old house where Lafayette visited. I know there's a connection with Lafayette and the Masons. And I know there's a big Mason contingent in the warfare selling group, because the head admiral in Norway, Igam, no, I think it, no, not Igam, because he's in charge of the prisons which have the drug lord. He's running the drug lord out of his prison, and he's a friend of Georgia's, Newt Igam. They were talking about this, as though I would know about it, you know. And he has a house or a cottage right outside of Kolsås, Norway, which is where they have their one of their underground bunkers. They have one in Narvik, and they do a lot of the cold weather training NATO does up there. But I know they're doing weapon shipments out of Norway.
Okay, we'll call this a wrap for
I'm tired.
this session. You have done a stellar job.
Well.
You have done a stellar job. You want to be sure to take all these things.
Yeah.
If they would be secure here, but let's not take
Well,
any chances.
This is not in order, but this is interesting because they're talking about having mercenary guys now, like the executive decision or they're hiring mercenaries. Countries are to do, but it's not just countries that are hiring mercenaries. It's others. This is his Princeton yearbook, and what some of the guys are doing this year, which is interesting. Okay, all set.
Okay, now we're on the clock. Who have we got here in this picture?
All right. Let me just put this here. This individual here is his name now is Rockland Williams. He's a South African quote unquote general who was with the army of the White Army in South Africa, who was actually a double agent for Mandela's forces. He's an assassin, a murderer, and
Did your husband tell you of any murders that he committed? Any people or any situations?
he stayed there with us. He was a guest of the State Department, and my husband arranged. This is my husband here. This is a gal in our church, Carla, whom I thought would be interested in going along with us that day because of the South African connection and Mandela and so forth. She's another battered military wife who lost a child. And anyway, she is a very bright lady, and we...
This guy's name again is?
Rockland Williams. He studied in Great Britain after this.
Does he have any
got a
other
doctorate.
Yeah.
He is very interested in Ireland. I think he's basically sort of part of that IRA kind of underground. But his father, interestingly enough, came over to North Carolina as one of the sort of underground trainees, or during World War II. They had a number of training bases for communists in this country. And his father trained and lived in North Carolina, but was not from America, which is interesting.
All right, now we're on the picture on the right, an individual laying down. That's your husband?
Yeah, my husband was a rageaholic. During Vietnam, he had to kill a number of people, and lots of people, and he was suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. And the interesting thing to me is that he cannot control himself when he is drinking, or either at odd times he goes into what's called a berserk state.
Okay, so this is one of his passed out stages?
Yeah, and yet he was chief of staff of the... This picture is of me and Sarah McClendon and General Carl Mundy, who became the Commandant of the Marine Corps after Al Gray, for whom my husband was Chief of Staff. This was at a party at 8th and I Street at the Marine Corps Commandant's house. It was a garden party for the Secretary of Defense.
He's a good guy or a bad guy?
Oh, bad guy. I mean, he knows what's going on and doing nothing about it, ordering hits and...
And where was this taken again?
It was in Washington, D.C. at the Marine Corps Commandant's garden party in August of 1996. It was a garden party for the Secretary of Defense and the Marine Corps Commandant Krulak.
Who would have taken this picture?
One of the military photographers, but they stole, I had at least 6 pictures of that garden party, and I would, because they were coming in my house and stealing pictures, this is the only one I have of that, but it's a picture of a picture, because they didn't want me to have any proof that I had been there, but I was there.
Okay.
This is a picture of my husband's, supposedly his retirement from the Marine Corps, which you never retire, according to my husband, from the Marine Corps. You're always a mercenary, and you work under the New Orleans 4th Marines, which are under a different kind of law than our country. Napoleonic law is the law of Louisiana. And my husband was always going down to Louisiana. They have a training school for assassins. They kind of hop around from Lake Pontchartrain to here and there.
And,
this is General Al Gray, who was the Commandant of the Marine Corps at that time when my husband retired. My husband was his Chief of Staff. This is my husband, George Raymond Griggs.
Okay, hang on just a second. Let's get a good shot of Gray here. Okay, who's the guy next to Gray?
This is my husband's son. He's not
This
quite
one?
right. Yeah, he's kind of a little bit of a, he's not right.
And the lady?
That's the Commandant's wife. He married her very late in life because he needed a 3rd star.
Now, who's the Commandant?
Al Gray, and her name is Jan Gray.
Is she a good lady?
She worked
Has
for...
potentials?
She has potential. She worked for him in his... See, even when he was general, he ran an intelligence operation, which was a contract organization, trying to hook politicians and get them. What is the word? In other words...
In compromising situations?
Yes. He has and still has an organization which brings in whores, prostitutes, whatever you want to say, who will compromise politicians so they can be used. Jan worked for him in that organization, which was not part of the military.
She was a hooker.
Well, I don't know. She chain smokes, she sleeps with the dogs and stuff. But when his mother was ill, when he was at FMF Lant, Fleet Marine Force Atlantic, Jan came to stay with his mother because she was on sedation and she may have talked too much to keep an eye on the mother. And then he married her because he would not have gotten his 3rd star or whatever without having been married, because he is a homosexual. He's a well-known group sex homosexual.
Okay.
And that's my husband, that's me, and that's my son, Garland, who's now married, and I have 2 grandchildren. This is a copy of my husband's diploma from the NATO Defense College at Rome.
Okay,
He was in the 56th course there.
Okay, again, this is the...
NATO Defense College, which is part of the of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Okay.
He also worked for NATO, and I was the head of the on the board of the NATO Wives Club. This is just, the Norfolk branch of NATO. Some secret papers that he had in the house, of course, he shouldn't have had. These were operations that were going on, amphibious operations. These are just some landings in Norway and different brigades and names.
Okay.
This is an original of a memorandum from when he was at NATO.
Okay.
This is a funny picture. I just heard about Marchenko was going to be at a book signing, and I kind of was curious to know whether he had even known George and so forth, and he did. And that's a picture of me with Richard Marchenko. And his father was, of course, one of these mercenaries who came to work for our country. And if you read any of his books, you know that they do everything they want. There's no right or wrong, and then these guys are churned out. And now this I have in here because this is about the royal family of Saudi Arabia. And my husband this is how my husband's gotten his power. Because my husband went to a private boys' school on scholarship. He was hooked the same way Oswald was, homosexually. Mm-hmm. And the three oldest Saudi boys were also hooked homosexually. The first one to come over after the uncle had been murdered, because uncle was a really good guy, and he favored the British. So these saboteurs, these communists who were in...
Now, when you say uncle, you're not making reference like Man from U.N.C.L.E.
No, the uncle of
Okay.
the Saudi royals.
I just wonder if there's any connection between that television series and 18...
But Mansour was killed. It was Mansour who was poisoned in Paris.
All right.
Okay. And my husband went to school with them. And now there's one of them involved with the Marine Corps. He's kind of... All right, this is the recruiter for my husband. I'm sorry it's not a better picture, but it was faxed to me, and they took the originals. This was a copy of an old one. His name was Charles Caddick, and he was a homosexual. Borland was a homosexual.
Okay, I need you to hold it up about 2 inches. There, that's close.
Charles Caddick died in the Saudi... one of the Saudi mansions outside of Marseille, where they used to have the group sex orgies. It's a place called Aix-les-Rosés.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I think that's then we get into the diary.
What's this here?
Oh, yeah, this is
Don't forget this.
one of my husband's friends whom I talked to about some things that were going on. He was on the ship with my husband,
Okay.
Ed Townley.
Did you mention any of these during our interviews at all? Any of these
No,
guys?
I didn't mention
Okay.
Ed Townley.
Good.
He's not. Let me see if there's anything here. Yeah. When I was going through, they've taken so many of the originals. I met with Ollie Whipple. Now, Ollie Whipple is another Marine intelligence person who told me about Dale Dorman.
Okay, do we have any pictures?
No.
What we need to reduce on this tape here is pictures.
Okay.
Or documents that are significant to anything we might have discussed.
Englehart. My husband's getting mail
Major
for an Englehart.
Joseph Engel.
And I know that there's a connection. Money's being laundered. This is a presidential citation, copy of one for my husband.
Okay.
Oh, and this number is important because this is not his Social Security number, and you can find out a lot by that number. I think it's either 077 170 or... But that number, you can find out a lot about my husband from that. Oh, here it is, 077670.
Hang on a second.
Oh.
President. These are certificates of what?
When he rises in rank
Oh, I see.
from one rank to the other.
Major. Captain.
We went from colonel all the way back.
I see.
He was, let's see,
Now, next step after colonel is
general.
general.
He didn't make general because of his wife's mishap.
Yeah. You're a stinker.
That kind of put him back a little bit.
You missed him, huh? Now.
No, I mean his first wife.
Oh.
Her death,
Yeah.
which was not. Here, he was with the U.S. Defense Liaison Group in Indonesia,
Okay.
where they were training assassins on Timor. They have a little factory for assassins and terrorists that was started by Mountbatten.
Okay.
Okay. This is NATO headquarters. These are notes by a Marine Corps friend of his from Princeton, who was in his class and who helped me a little bit to understand what was going on. But this is interesting in his handwriting because it says, Robertson says Kay has spoken of abuses, George spending up to the limit, $33,000 on credit cards. He says an intervention often might be good. J.R., Jim Robertson, is disturbed by Kay's stories, and this is J.R.'s number. Well, who is Jim Robertson now but the head of the Justice Department Criminal Division? And this is in his handwriting. They've taken the originals. Mike Kimmel was mentioned to me by Jim Proctor, who has written this. Mike Kimmel is the son of the famous admiral who was the head of Pearl Harbor at the Pearl Harbor bombing. And my theory is that these guys take the sons of generals and then they suck them into their little thing. Jack Herman, in the dark. Jack Herman was my husband's roommate from Brooklyn, whose father was Barbara Streisand's doctor, and who is really literally kind of a basket case since he graduated from Princeton. Siegel is the president of the class.
Right.
John Wilhelm, I think he's related to Charlie Wilhelm, whom my husband's now working for. He's in intelligence.
We have a picture of him in the reading.
Yeah, we do have a picture of John Wilhelm. Murdered or something happens to me. And I'm really scared when I talk about this.
It's all right. The more you talk about it, and the more people know, the more safe you are.
This guy, his name is V.W. Wooten. He was and his son Wallace, he said it was his son. This is the license number, ZYF 3977, Chrysler LeBaron Maroon. The time, it was 5:30:96, 2 o'clock, from about 2 until 4:30 in the afternoon. They were parked there, and on his clipboard he had personal data. He had a book entitled Religions of the World. He was obviously studying Islamic religions, because that was, what the thing. 2 Army pea green coats, his curriculum vitae, and he had 21 years of service with the Air Force. Among the top, I couldn't read the rest of that. Experience, 1992 to present. Chief of Security, K.I. Sawyer. Commander of 350 persons. Provides protection, top secret security, education, master's degree, bachelor's degree. Squadron officer, Air Force Staff College, fundamentals of probably total quality, I don't know, awards, Air Training Command. Member of the Marquette, he's a fraternal order of police member. But this is interesting. 1991 to 1992, Provost Marshal at Keflavik, Iceland, which is where all of this, the drug smuggling and stuff goes through that airport. Staff supervisor of 500 people, briefed U.S. ambassador during the visit of the Pope John. He was guarding.
And this guy again is who?
Was guarding my neighborhood.
V.W. Wooten?
Wooten. Yeah. All right, this is just a letter from Jim Proctor to Mike Kimmel, who was the son of the famous admiral, head of Admiral Kimmel, World War II's, the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And it says, it seems George has recently disappeared from home for short periods. Kay's trying to talk to everyone she believes who knew George better than average, both in reference to where he might be and in perhaps a more important sense, what makes him tick. Apparently, his pattern predates their marriage by quite a lot. She's coming to Washington sometime the week of March the 4th through the 9th, but at a minimum, she would like a call from you. Her number in Virginia Beach is that. I saw your picture in the 35th reunion book, sailing off Shadyside, blah, blah, blah. And both of these were Princeton roommates of my husband.
Okay.
This is from the Princeton military ROTC book, which has the names of the men who were commissioned in the Marine Corps at the time my husband was. There's George Raymond Griggs, and there's Jim Proctor, whose handwriting and letter to the other guy.
Okay.
All right? And Tom Lewis, I think, is in there. These are just more notes.
Okay.
This is a medical complaint. When after I was battered and beaten, I tried to get copies of my pictures. They wouldn't let me have them.
From the medical?
Yeah, they wouldn't. These are just some little things about. It's not that important. I was just writing down things I remembered. I don't think this is just about some of his background. Yeah. No, this is not really. These are just some legal things. Oh, one, yeah. I had so many break-ins in my house, and this was one, and they always had a Marine, 20-year Marine as a police officer, who would interview me and say, oh, well, there's nothing, nothing wrong. You're just imagining things. Well, this particular incident, they were SEALs. They were dressed in black. They were amphibious men. My neighborhood is surrounded by water.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did they break into my house and my car, they were interrupted by a neighbor's dog, a Doberman kind of dog, who chased them, and they left my suitcase in Judge Reed's woods. I guess they were intending to get it the next day or something. But the interesting thing is, my neighbor, Mrs. Cummings, saw them, and she had been noticing the white van, which I had also been noticing in the neighborhood. And she reported it to the police, and they did nothing about it. And the very day that we had a robbery, they had tried to break into her house because it looks out over my house during the day, like the day before. And she talked to the same police officer, and he didn't even tell her there'd been a break-in in my house. And they not only did they break into my car, but they broke into my brother's cars. Oh, there are all these houses around, and they took my brother's, some of my brother's things. This is just about what she described to me 2 weeks before the cars were vandalized.
Okay.
All right. Okay, this is just describing that. Officer Satterwhite. I would send things to Jewel McGee. These are just. I had a lot of things going on in my house where they were doing things. Oh yeah, this is from the alumni list of Princeton, and I don't have the. In other words, the Saudi Royals are in the alumni class list, but they're not in this particular one. But if you call the Hun School and you get a list of the alumni, then you will find the Saudis are there. Now this, the CFR list, this is why I have this. This is the CFR, Council of Foreign Relationship members. And all of these I've I've heard about or met some of them. My husband's mentioned. There's some that are also skull and bones at the same time. It's the Yale leadership crowd. Howard Baker, George Ball. Steve Bell I know really well. He is a friend of my former husband's family.
Did we mention him in the interview at all? Steve Bell?
No. John Blum we did mention. My son is married to his daughter. John Blum, he's a Brooklyn, Yale-y. His best friend is this Rockefeller guy, not Jay.
His son is married to your daughter.
No, his daughter is married to my son.
His daughter's married to you.
And they met. His father, they're Jewish, part Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting to me is that, I married the governor's grandson, and my son is John Garland Pollard the fourth. I mean, you're talking old Virginia. I was like a brooding mare for them. I mean, I was a bird of Virginia. It was kind of like, you marry this John Garland Pollard. Well, my son went to Woodbury Forest, which is where George Bush's son went and Oliver North's son went.
Okay.
My son went there for 4 years, and he met Alice Blum, who, they have a place in Maine, and there's a lot I know about John Blum, but I didn't mention that. I mean, there's so much.
John Brokaw's name is in
John Brokaw, Califano, Jimmy Carter, Chafee, Bill Clinton, Cisneros, Cheney, so forth. Harding Carter is a real close personal friend of my husband's and a Princeton graduate.
Okay, lift this up to us.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh.
Harding Carter.
Okay.
And so is William Crow.
And who is he?
He's a Princeton classmate of my husband's who was
What does
in
he do?
the Carter administration, intelligence.
Okay.
All mostly intelligence. And they're not intelligent. Michael Dukakis, Andrew Biddle Duke, Larry Eagleburger, he and Henry Kissinger were good friends. Einhorn, oh, no, I didn't mention him, so I won't.
Okay.
Forstall, he's the son of James Forstall, who was murdered.
Okay.
Ellen Frost and Firestone, Gelb, David Gergen.
Anybody you might have mentioned in the tapes?
Let's see, I'll go real quick. I may have mentioned David Hoopsbaugh, I think so. No, okay. These are just CFR people.
Well,
Henry Kissinger.
Reigns, yeah.
Oh, another good friend of my husband's is Cord Meyer, and Bob McFarland, really good friend of my husband. Pelletreau, real good friend of George's. The Pincus family. Oh, Consuelo Rice, she's a good friend of my husband's. The Rostos, all four of the Rostos. Yeah, these are bad guys, major bad guys. David Rockefeller is a friend of my son's. He came to my son's wedding.
David Rockefeller?
Mm-hmm. In Connecticut. He was in Connecticut. George Schultz, really good friend of George's and everybody. He's a big power guy. He knows a lot. He's the one who went to Clinton's and told Clinton not to run, that they were going to get him.
Yeah.
And had a meeting, and Clinton threw something at him and stuff. Called Sarah McClendon. Sarah was full of that story for a number of days. Harry Train lives at the beach, and he's, I know him very well. He's part of the New World Order crowd, former. Strobe Talbot, another good friend of my husband's, really good friend. David Stockman.
Dave Stockman, he's a Michigan boy.
Oh, Caspar Weinberger, Cap Weinberger. That's it.
What about Stockman?
Oh, Casimir Yost, I mentioned him. I'm sure that's Mary Clark Yost's son. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I know it.
Okay.
Do you know Mary Clark? That's that. This I think is interesting. This is an intelligence and electronic warfare operations book distributed by the Army, And what it shows me is how arrogant they are about subversion and deception. In other words, this is just a regular old field manual, 1983 or whatever. And deception is so important. And deep operations, deep cover. Now they don't have the word.
Open that up again where it says deep cover. Get a close shot of that. Okay.
In the special operations is what my husband was head of, operations. The electronic warfare, an important part of electronic warfare is deception and knowing everything about the person, not just knowing about the target. Now, human beings are called targets. Women now are being targeted by the military,
Right.
wives like me. So they'll have a team finding out everything about my grandparents, my family, who my friends are, to try and discredit me. And, of course, everybody who is flagged, who is a target, they'll jamming is a deliberate radiation or re-radiation of electromagnetic energy to prevent or downgrade the reception of information by a receiver. The multi-spot jamming is directed against more than one frequency. In other words, they jam I've had my caller ID downloaded. Sarah McClendon called my house and was told she couldn't reach me. It was a military base. MED is conducted. MED is manipulative electronic deception. Simulative electronic deception is SED. MED is conducted by altering the electromagnetic profile of friendly forces. It seeks to counter hostile electronic warfare and SIGINT activities by manipulating friendly electronic magnetic emissions. This is done by magnifying the technical characteristics and profiles which would provide an accurate picture of friendly intentions by deliberately transmitting false information. In other words, they are interested in deception as part of their line of attack.
Okay, cool.
Okay. It just goes on and on and on.
Well, it authenticates it. They teach this stuff.
Yeah.
Then the signal pictures you had.
Oh, yeah.
Snaps.
Real handsome guy. His dad was a Nazi soldier. Okay, was with the big elite. Name is Ken Millis. And that's his mother, Flo, from 7 Mile, Ohio. Really nice.
All right.
That's that former Marine chief of staff. While my husband's wife was being put in the grave.
Let me zero in here again a little bit here. Back off a little bit. We're getting tight on that.
These are some original letters that he wrote to his lady friend when he was married to his first wife.
Okay, now once again, these the significance here
He is a Marine colonel who was always there when George would sort of disappear, but he was chief of staff.
Okay. And the ladies are?
His wife and his mother and my husband and me.
Okay.
Okay.
Whoops.
Oh, I'm
Get the
sorry.
pictures.
Sorry.
Okay, the other one shows that you're actually human.
Yeah.
Dog lover.
Yeah. Princeton ashtray.
And who's in the picture above?
That's his first wife's mother, and his daughter and his daughter-in-law with the baby that I just prayed that there would be a granddaughter. And this is Melinda, little Melinda, in front of the dollhouse in our yard.
Okay.
Okay? This is his first wife
Can't tell you what.
with a dog.
Let's hold those right about, I don't know. Let me put something up there so we get beyond.
How about this?
Here we go. There we go. Just lay them on top of that.
All right. I never knew Sue.
That's his first wife.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next.
Yep. This is George and his cousin Bob. They're big drinkers in that family. I don't know who the other people are.
Okay.
This is George in one of his rages. This was in the morning too, without alcohol.
Gotta back up in order to get focused. Back up to the raging one, the one we did before.
I mean, I'm scared. You're talking major injuries I've had, broken bones, and I reach out for help, and then I become the target.
So you're taking a picture while this rage is going on?
Yeah, risk of my life.
Was he where you were taking the photo?
He's in a total, unbelievable state.
Okay, next.
It's called the berserk state. This is just, when he walks around nude, when he gets in these stages.
Okay.
Can't help. I mean, I don't know. I just don't know how to. This is him again. He'd take a lot of the pictures and cameras. He'd break cameras, and because I was trying to get somebody to help me protect my life. Just get some help. That's all. I wasn't trying to tell on him or, be a bad. I was just trying to get some help. And I was scared. I mean, this is the normal look.
He has the look that someone's a little deranged.
Yeah.
Where's the we got?
This is a guy working now for Wilhelm in Florida. I mean, giving secrets away, that's the least of the thing. This is former mother-in-law and me, Cody. Here he is in his bedroom.
Okay, now, his particular state of mind here is what? He looks a little defiant.
Yeah. Well, what's he doing? It's fine if he's a nudist, but, I didn't know that. You didn't say, I'm a nudist. It's just... It's like I was married to a stranger. This is the George that I thought I knew.
Okay, I'll tell you what, on that picture there. You know that little rule of thirds I told you about?
Yeah.
Whoever took that picture did not know about it.
Oh, right.
They have the on the bottom third, not the upper third. Where was this taken?
At the Norwegian lady statue.
Okay.
And this had to do, they gave me a Norwegian Viking ship that day. That was the port master of Moss, Norway, George.
Okay.
Happy George. This is another, I think we have that one.
Oh, let's do a Happy George, too.
Yeah, let's do Happy George. This is George on Millis's boat with his little Princeton hat, and we're going out in the boat.
Okay.
And this is again the one when he was he wouldn't eat for 2 days, Just,
Passed out, okay.
Yeah. This is him in the yard. He'd do that nude in the yard, it was just so,
Bizarre.
Yeah. Now he had the menage a trois, menage a quatre with this couple This is his wife, Sue, who's with Jim Earl, and this is Nancy Earl and George. And they would do the group sex, the swinging or whatever you call it. And I had lots of people tell me that, and yet he's, very trusted, and they know everything kind of about him. This is another woman he was sleeping with in Beirut, whose husband was the assistant director at the American University of Beirut, who was an Arab. She was an intelligence person. And her son is Kashmir.
Okay.
This is just, some bruises of me. That's not very nice to look at.
There are injuries.
This is George with his booze.
That's good. But he looks like a little happier George.
Oh, he's always smiling when he's drinking. Bless his heart. He's always smiling.
Okay.
I'm trying to... This was a secretary in Indonesia that, and I know this is kind of terrible, but he and Anne Bouchou's husband and George, they would all sleep together. He went to visit her parents in Australia. And he told me about that. Now this is Louis Buell, the famous general, who was the one who was going to get him, he was going to be a general, but Louis died too soon. There's Louis again. Here's Halab's address. You can tell that, he tore it up. But I went and retrieved it. There's Halab and company, Halab. And these are just some letters to Anne Bouchou, another person. That's basically it, I think. I think we've got all of it.
Okay.
That's it.
Right, then any other photos you... Yeah, when would that have been?
Oh, 93, somewhere around in there. 94. November.
Hang on a second, don't move it.
Okay.
Okay.
This is Mr. T. Parker Host, Burma assassin, friend of my husband's, owned one shipping agency when he met my husband, knew he was a friend of George Bush's, wound up with 8 or 9. Changed from being a Democrat to a Republican to introducing George Bush in 96 when he came to speak to a banquet that he arranged ostensibly for John Warner. But when, they did a fundraising thing, you meet George Bush and Barbara, pay $1,000 or $500. Well, he's a mover and shaker and a nudist and a group sex guy. His sons are real messed up. But he's my husband's best buddy. That's it. That's George's. And that's at his farm. And we would go to the farm, and George and Parker would go out on the boat for 2 and 3 hours. And I thought, what is going on out there,
Okay.
Here's a little thing about T. Parker Host, became chairman of T. Parker Host Incorporated. David Weibel. That's just Parker.
Okay.
This is his wife, Anne, and I introduced him to her.
Good work.
She's my school friend,
Is she still married to him?
Yeah, he's loaded. She wants a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Her uncle is one of the guys who went to the moon, Collins. Her grandfather was this big Army general, so I didn't know Anne was all that well connected to the Army. Her uncle was head of the Army's big, after he retired, library or, their records.
Yeah.
And her grandfather, Lawton Collins, was the head of Vietnam before, you're talking major, if you're interested in the Army. Mm-hmm. So I introduced her to Parker, and he was just a little Anyway.
What's the next one?
Okay. George and the Earls.
That's the swap
The swap.
team.
Swap
And
team.
within that picture, he's made a swap.
Okay, have fun.
Hi. Oh, glad to see you.
Nice seeing you, Roland.
That's great. Maybe in here.
Okay, roll.
Nah, just kidding.
Okay. Sit back in your seat, just for a
All
second.
right.
Okay. I think we're back.
I write things down. When I don't have a pad, I write them on little things because my brain won't hold all these funny names.
You didn't take your pad with you last night.
Pardon?
Too bad you didn't take that pad.
I should have. And I'm just trying to find where in the heck I
The
put
guns
that.
are wired. And I am not wired.
I know he was called the Commissar, and they called him the Commissar. He was the one who did all of the training for the, they had a Halo school, George told me, in the Philippines where they trained the Delta Force, the assassins in the Philippines. They also had a school like that. The Australians had one in Indonesia on an island where they're having big kind of East Timor.
East Timor, yeah.
Yeah, it's in the mountains. And it was started, yeah. And the Portuguese are involved in this in some way.
Based on your newest lesson, you learned about the line of Thursday. Very good? All right, great. We're rolling. We're recording. We are doing it right now. And good deal. Hey, Albert? Hit this camera here. Tighten the shot just ever so slightly, would you? You don't have to get all the way. You could reach from that side easier. See what I'm saying right here? Just tighten it just a wee little bit. Perfect. You got it.
Huh?
Good.
I said that's perfect.
What's that? The keys? Did I take the keys? You need the keys.
My car.
Gotcha. Okay, then hurry back because I can't be around the car.
No, I'll be right back. A little bit lower below the pocket, but that's okay. Good shot.
I think so.
Yes, oh, yes, sir.
All right. Now, we're having a fascinating conversation talking to the wife of the former
Chief of Staff, Marine Atlantic, head of the intelligence group that went to Beirut. They were already meeting over there. He was before the Beirut bombing. The NATO intelligence wet operations guy, psychological operations guy.
Okay, now when you refer to wet operations, W-E-T, does that stand for something?
Yes, it means murder, assassinations groups.
Oh.
NATO has a group of assassins and psychological operations specialists who work in combined operations to destroy targets.
Okay.
My husband tried to explain to me the first 3 years of marriage how it all works. I was assistant director of the Chamber of Commerce. I was the first woman on the board of the Foreign Commerce Club in Norfolk. He thought that I was a worldly woman. I had dated a number of guys who were high level, like Jerry Unruh, who was the captain of the Saratoga, a man who was very high up in the Army intelligence in Richmond. I had been married to a governor's grandson whose family were all in intelligence. His father was Harvard economics professor. They thought...
You even mentioned that years ago you dated John Engler.
John
who
Engler,
is now
who
our
was in
governor.
ROTC. I'm sure it's the same John Engler if he was in the Navy. I dated a John Engler who was in the ROTC in Norfolk because, Norfolk is the largest military complex in the world. We have Langley, the Air Force Base, which does intelligence work. We have Camp Perry. which is an intelligence, international intelligence spot, all of the naval bases, the Master Jet Base, Training and Doctrine Command, which is Army, Fort Story. And in fact, Fort Story was where the recent Secretary of the Army was told he had to leave. I have intelligence guys who tell me truth because they know they can't talk, and I get a lot of scoops. Toko West, who was basically honest, and like Colin Powell, most African-American men are not going to condone murder and assassinations and so forth when they find out about it. Togo West.
No, you think there's something, I'm missing something here. The Afro-American man is not like...
Generally. Mm-hmm.
Generally. So you feel that Colin Powell is a different cut of general than these other guys we've been talking about? Oh,
absolutely. Colin Powell's... The wonderful thing about some of the African-American men I've met is they'll tell truth.
Why would they allow these guys to rise in rank then?
As puppets, thinking that they will, be able to make them do certain things, because psychologically they're innocent, they're naive. They cannot believe that our government has got hit squads, that there's group sex going on, that they are giving people money in exchange, for their services. Mercenary training is going on in the Army and the Air Force at the highest circles. And Colonel John Ryman, Dr. John Ryman, they have him targeted as a kook. Colonel John Ryman lives in California. He was on the high track up, the Rising Star track. He was in Great Britain. He found out about a murder over there.
Okay.
He reported it. He also had the crazy idea that there ought to be a peace college in Cambridge. We ought to really start working towards peace. Well, the minute he got back, he gave an idea, a synopsis of his sort of peace college idea to Colin Powell and his wife. Colin Powell took it to the National Security Council. When Ryman got back, and I'm not sure of the logistics and the chronology of all of this, but I'm in contact with him, he was put in a funny farm. I think he was put in a place in either New Orleans or St. Elizabeth's Hospital, where they put Ezra Pound, and where they've got Reagan's assassin. St. Elizabeth's Hospital, like the Eastern State Hospital in Williamsburg, has Army intelligence people in there. They're targets, people who have decided to tell truth or whatever. In other words, people who believe in the American dream, who are Christians, who are trying to get things straightened out. If they transgress that line where they upset somebody in high command, just like in Germany, they all of a sudden move from being a person to being a target, from being a human being, a Christian, a loving, wonderful soul, to being a target, therefore the enemy. This is also what happened in Germany. Why should God makes us all wonderful and beautiful? Those of us who have the courage of our convictions and who believe in what Christ did, who stand tall, why should the leaders not be able to speak and tell truth? Because it's in the rainbow of truth, the rainbow of individuals who are God-fearing and love truth, in which we can build a better world. So why are good people silenced? Why are their papers gone through? I have an interesting... I took some notes last night, and I'm trying to...
Okay. Well, they're silenced because they are they're in a conflict of good versus evil.
Yeah.
In this struggle.
Where am I? I need my...
No problem. We can find it.
Yeah, I need my...
Your checkmate book is down there.
Oh, yeah, this is what...
Is it in there?
Yeah. What's happened to me, what's happened to people like Marianne Poors, Deborah Von Trapp, Colonel Sabo's dead.
Let's talk about Deborah Von Trapp for a second, because I've heard the name, but I somehow associate her with there was something negative, or there was some discrediting of what she... Is she the same Deborah Von Trapp that alleged that the Oklahoma City bombing was somehow Japanese related? Or is that a different person?
Now, she may, I do not know. I've met her on the phone through Sarah McClendon when I was staying with Sarah. Everybody's experience is different. When you're a Christian, when you're a very strong Protestant Christian, as I am, and you're walking in light, you're walking in truth, you take people at their word until you find out that they've lied to you. And if they have intentionally lied, then, I just let God deal with them. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't believe
So maybe
in
somebody fed her disinformation solely designed to discredit her.
Yeah. She, and I do believe this is true, I know that she worked in the White House. I know she worked under a man named Getzman and some mob figures in the White House who were Army. Now, this CIA thing, from my experience, is bogus. Because every person I've known who was in the CIA was in military intelligence first. For example, my husband. He told me furtively when I saw him in court, I don't work for the CIA. I knew he was telling the truth. He was afraid. He wanted me to know. Point is, he works under the Army. He's a Marine Corps, high-level intelligence officer. But he's under all these Army people. So I'm having to assume that the judge, the lawyers, the commissioners, all the people who are handling my husband when he's around me, because I really believe that he loves me, even though he's under their control. And I think that's why he's been totally kept away from me. His daughter-in-law told me he can't come back because he'd end up staying. It was, the point is that David Lay, my brother-in-law for 20-some years, I married John Garland Pollard, whose sister Mary Lloyd Pollard married a CIA agent, David Lay. David Lay was Harvard, hasty pudding, translates Mandarin Chinese. He's a brain. His family came over from Germany. I think they were Zionists. He doesn't believe in any religion, but he is still working for this intelligence arm. He's doing wargaming for this monolith, this global monolith. He's playing chess by mail. He's writing articles about the Middle East. He's an expert on, what's going on in the Middle East from the Israeli perspective. He's Army. I was with my sister-in-law when he went on a mission, and she was in the same psychological state that I was in. This is how I know.
And that state succinctly is?
Keep the women out of it, terrorize the women, make the women fearful of their own. In other words, make them. I can't describe what I went through except to say that every single Marine wife that I know is in that psychological state. Thank God, thank my grandmother for her wonderful Presbyterian background. Women are intelligent, kind of, you've got the spunk in you or the genes or Jesus Christ, whatever it is. I know truth, and truth is vitally important to me. I cannot live a lie. Do you know? I can't live a lie. I cannot. Maybe I was injected with penicillin when I was an infant. I don't know. But
so like that incident at the officers' club where your husband at the time told you, just get used to it. This is the way that it is.
Yes.
You just can't get used to living some facade and looking the other way as if something doesn't exist.
No. And I mean, he's sick. My husband's really mentally sick. Any man, I believe he killed his first wife, Sue. He's dangerous. We're married for a month. He gets a letter and a phone call from Mary Clark Joes Talab and Anne Bouchou, and naturally a wife who's newly married to a handsome man isn't wanting other women to write, and I'm saying, and I've already found out who they are. I've got a master's degree, I'm a researcher, and I'm saying, George, what are you doing hanging around spies? I didn't know about double agents, and Kashmir Yost is on the Council of Foreign Relations. Her son, I'm sure it's her son or her cousin. And her husband, as I mentioned before, was a Muslim who was really a turn person on the Palestinians, who worked at the American University of Beirut. My husband was sleeping with her, Al Gray. Everybody knew this. And I didn't know that this is what you do until I called Valerie Wilhelm, General Charles Wilhelm's wife, on the phone. Now, who is General Charles Wilhelm? Right now. And let me tell you what she told me.
Okay.
You just have to get used to it, Kay. She told me about, her husband I said, George has got another man. Lieutenant Colonel Michael O'Boyle, whom I was told is his boyfriend,
And she says you just have to get used to it?
She said you just got to get used to it. Same thing came from the wife of General John Sheehan, Jack Sheehan, head of NATO, a friend of mine, been to parties at my house. And I see, by now I've gotten my little tape recorder from Radio Shack, and I'm taping phone calls because nobody's going to believe me, so I've got my little tape recorder and I'm talking to Sheehan's wife. Well, she's saying, come on over. Let's have coffee. You come over at so-and-so time. So I invite Carolyn Millis, whose husband was the temporary chief of staff after my husband's wife's murder. Sue, I know Sue was murdered, blow on the head. I had so many blows on the head, you can't even believe it. Broken bones and so forth. Well, in the middle of these terrorism episodes that my husband would put me through, he would say things like, I'm down on the ground, he's got a .45 to my head, or he's strangling me with his thumb on my jugular vein, and he's saying in this sergeant-like voice, you have got to believe me. You cannot question me. In other words, it's like, I am being interrogated, or it's the most awful experience to have the one you want to love, the one you have made your commitment with, have you in pinholes, and knowing he's an experienced guy, so it's horrible. And these wives, now I cannot say whether their husbands have done the same thing. I don't think they have, but what they train them to do is to be speeding along the highway. It's shock treatment is what it is. I've been told it's shock treatment. And they're driving along the highway, and you've got an important person to meet or an important party. You're all dressed up, or you're going to somebody's house. So he screeches on the brakes, provokes you in some way. You don't even want to fight. You say, I don't want to fight. What is this all about? And he's just speeding up, going like, 90 miles an hour, screeches on the brakes, and then he gets out and runs. You cannot believe, it's horrible.
And where did he run to?
Oh, there was a party, a Norwegian party. The first time that happened was when we were down in North Carolina with the camera, when he wanted to get my camera. I nearly drowned. He wanted me to tell him where the camera was. He tried to kill me that night to scare me so that I would behave. But I was raised in a family with strong men. You stand tall. You don't let people intimidate you when you know you're right. Because there are more important things. God is above us all. Jesus Christ is above us all. Truth is above everything. The Ten Commandments are above everything. Under that is Jesus Christ, and then your mate. So I put, that's why I put him in very high esteem, but I knew he was not normal. I'm an intelligent woman. I read. So I was hoping I could change him. So it was a battle. It was a spiritual battle going on. I knew it was a spiritual battle. And I was believing that that I could, reprogram him, essentially, subconsciously. Now, I didn't know that at the time, what was going through me, but I was really being tested
course, the many years of operant conditioning he'd been through fortified and solidified his positions.
Yes.
He was far more entrenched an operative than you were going to be able to undo.
Oh, he was involved in the HALO program, the Max.
HALO? What's HALO?
He mentioned it was something to do with training assassins and training psychological operations specialists. It was in the Philippines. They also had one in Panama.
Okay.
They had a school for Army and other guys where they would strip them down nude. They would tie them onto logs. The man who ran the school was dressed up as a Nazi soldier, even though his name was Olenchek or something. He was a Czechoslovakian pervert.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had a man who dressed up like a woman who was really pretty, you know. And here are these guys nude, and they're training them to kill. And in fact, there's a book called Copperhead, which I have a copy of, which is all about, it was written by a commando guerrilla who was from North Carolina, who had been battered badly, or West Virginia, I think he was. And his father had battered him, beaten him. Well, what they do is, in the prisons, through this CASA system and so forth, they take the innocent little boys who've been battered by their parents, and they turn them into assassins by making homosexuals of them or something. Now, I believe that these men are redeemable because I believe that men like my husband and Oswald, they're held by the secrecy, by the power of this adolescent group which controls them. And I believe that if they knew that there were strong women, mothers, and wives who would be behind them 1,000%, they'll have the courage to come and speak out. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Or at least to stop the growth of this stuff, because it's the growth of this stuff they are intending to destroy America.
Well, there certainly seems to be a growth in homosexual activity, homosexual acceptance, homosexual promotion, homosexual acceptance in our society today.
Yeah.
And it just seems like everywhere you turn, you're finding a little group of homosexuals, or even in our local community, I'm surprised how many homosexuals are running businesses, and certain restaurants are becoming homosexual hangouts. So you know, well, the owner must be a homo if he hires homos. And I hate to admit that I think this is the way things are in business and banking and in education. Oh, the local college, university.
Yeah.
I've had people tell me that they're just loaded.
You cannot get a job unless you are special, elite, irregular. Now, the frightening thing here is, number one, this is the underlying thing. This is what happened in Nazi Germany. This is exactly the same pattern that happened in Nazi Germany, the exclusion of women and mothers who love their children. Now, I'm pragmatic enough to realize and say, look, we mothers look at history and we look at the future. We're pretty daggone damn wise. I don't use profanity unless I'm talking to soldiers, but I've learned to use, this is what they listen to. They're really, I can talk sailor talk, I can talk Marine talk, I can talk commando talk.